What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my third channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Are you sure this is wise, brother Neji? Asked the blonde Uzumaki who was sitting next to him. He squeezed the hand of his wife who was sitting on the other side of him. The three of them were sitting outside the Hokage's office, the worn walls oblivious to what was currently going on within said office. I surely have no objections, but Lilith is my wife, not yours. I find it hard to believe you'd allow something like this to happen for her sake. Neji was never the kind of person who would force his will onto another, but if it came to the safety or well-being of his wife and family, he'd gladly subjugate the entire world. His brother, no matter what his feelings are in the present, wasn't someone who'd sacrifice others for his happiness, or so he thought. We are not living in the world we used to. Neji Naruto spoke, his eyes never leaving the door of the Hokage's office. It was a large door, and many eyes have gazed upon it just like his. No, this door had never been looked at by eyes like his. Even we have to play by the shinobi world's rules. Our morals are out of place and our methods will do nothing but make our goals all the more difficult. His powerful eyes finally looked upon Neji's pure white orbs and then Lilith's bright azure ones, and in that moment they knew Naruto was disgusted with what he was allowing happen, but for the sake of peace he was sacrificing his beliefs. We will have to do many things that we find unpleasant and sickening, but if we are to cure this world we have to first purge it. Lilith flinched when he said purge. Apparently she was still terrified after what happened the last time, and in all honesty she should be deep within Naruto's mind. His son's voice whispered to him, an almost gentle, delicate tone to his words, like he was being comforted, like father, like son. Of course Kurama would never admit to respecting the yandere to his face, but that didn't matter. Those words gave Naruto the strength to endure his decision. I am with you, brother. Whatever you decide, I will support 100%. If we must cast aside our beliefs and dirty our hands with the blood of our enemies, then I will do so swiftly. Neji replied, you have accepted the one thing I love more than peace, and for that I will do whatever you ask of me. Naruto gave a small tired smile, nodding his head at his brother. Thank you, Neji. Before anyone could speak anymore, the large door of the Hokage's office opened and an ANBU operative walked out. Naruto said nothing to this operative. He acted as if this operative wasn't even there. As the agent walked past them to the stairs that led down, he whispered something to Naruto that only he could hear, and with that single whisper Uchiha Shursui was gone. With a flicker, his moniker proving true, it was done. Naruto sighed deeply and braced himself as the three of them walked into the office of the Hokage, ready to face his disgusting acts. He really wasn't sure if he could keep up with the shinobi world. His plan worked. In only 1 week Lilith was officially a citizen of Kanagakura no Sato and a genin, a part of Naruto's and Neji's team, which still had no sensei. Using Shursui's specialty sped up the whole process, and now, well, when they actually got a sensei they could officially start missions and be considered active shinobi. Naruto still wasn't okay with what he allowed. Shursui was still a young man just like Itachi and was just as enthusiastic to finally attain peace. To ask him to use Koto Amatsukami on the Hokage was the hardest decision the now Uzumaki had to make since his return. Shursui's Mangekyo Sharingan's technique was truly powerful and extremely useful, but it went against almost everything Naruto believed in, what he fought against in his first life. It needed to be done though. Lilith would never have been accepted into the village so quickly, never mind the academy. They needed her now, and they didn't have the kind of time to wait, and he was done treating her like a demon simply because she was born that way. She was no longer just a demon, she was no longer just another enemy, she was his sister, his brother's wife and love. They didn't have much family in this era, and he wasn't going to deny her the right to call him a brother any longer. They were a family now, the three of them. Deep within Naruto, Kurama stirred, growling lowly. Naruto chuckled. The four of us, he whispered. What was that? Neji asked. Neji, Naruto, Lilith and Itachi walked towards the Uchiha compound, ready to relax and converse for the rest of the night. Naruto, Neji and Lilith had spent the entire day with the Hokage, assisting him with his paperwork. Itachi was busy with his ANBU duties, which he was glad no longer involved spying on his own family. The sun was setting and the sky was ablaze with a concoction of red, orange and yellow. The village was quiet for a major hidden village. The wind was cool and the air was fresh. It was really a calm and relaxing day. Too bad it would be interrupted. An ANBU garbed in her full ANBU gear flickered into existence right in front of them, her mask hiding her face from them. The breeze ran through her short black hair. A message from the Hokage Team 6, she began. You are to report to the Hokage's office immediately. Thank you, ANBU-san. We'll head over there now. Naruto smiled, bowing his head slightly in a respectable thank you manner. You are welcome, Sennin-sama, the ANBU whispered before vanishing. Ah, she was an Uchiha. Then Naruto smiled. Who is she? Itachi, he asked his friend. I think her Name is Haney. She's the granddaughter of one of the elders. Haney was one of the few people who joined the ANBU after the Uchiha were no longer being spied on. Itachi wasn't very familiar with her, but they did go on a mission together once. Why so interested? Brother Neji asked in an insinuating tone. Just curious is all, Naruto replied, completely ignoring his brother's tone. There was only one woman he'd ever look at that way. Anyhow, we should go. The Hokage is waiting for us. Do you want me to come with you? Itachi asked. He was always very protective of them. It will be fine, little dragon. We will return soon, Naruto promised. He wasn't sure why his team was being summoned, but he was sure it wasn't because they did anything to get themselves in trouble. They weren't going to be hurt either. Konoha didn't often harm their own people, and if they did try to harm his family, he'd make sure they never tried to again. His family meant everything to him, and he wasn't going to let it go again ever. The world would burn to ash before his family was shattered to pieces again. Deep within him his son stirred, this time in agreement. Kurama, he'd personally rip the world asunder before he was left all alone again. Team 6 walked through the doors of the Hokage's office, calm stoic facades marring their faces when they entered. However, there was more than the Hokage waiting for them. Like usually, Sarutobi Hiruzen was sitting at his desk, his ever-present pipe in his grasp, his other hand rubbing his temple. In that moment the Sandaime looked his age and then some. Naruto-kun, the Hokage greeted Neji-kun. Lilith-chan, he greeted the others. Please sit in front of the Hokage's desk. 3 seats were situated. They were expecting them directly to the Sandaime's right. Shimura Danzo stood, his rough aged visage accenting the seriousness that was almost palpable in the room. With almost reluctant nods the 3 youngest, which were also technically the oldest people in the room, sat, their eyes examining the other shinobi who were assembled to the Hokage's left. The man with almost lazy features, who was also gruff-looking, stood, his pineapple-shaped black hair standing just the same. His eyes were aloof, but Team 6 could see the analytical prowess within them. This man was most likely the smartest person in the room, and if this man was who Naruto thought he was, then he really was, because there hasn't been a more brilliant mind than Nara Shikaku since the Nidaime Hokage himself, according to Itachi. Sitting on the side of the room, an older-looking man and woman sat, their posture rigid and cold. They stared at the members of Team 6 with something akin to suspicious eyes. They must be the village elders that Itachi warned them about. Apparently these two, Hamura and Koharu, were almost as underhanded as the old war hawk. The last person inside the rather spacious room, which Naruto never knew was actually so large, was a tall, wild-looking man with a mane of long white hair that was as wild as his appearance. He wore a red vest over green clothing, and he had 2 red streaks running down the bottom sides of his eyes. A large scroll was strapped to his back, and a headband with a kanji for oil on it was wrapped around his head. The man watched Naruto with a strange amount of detail, like he knew exactly who he was. Hokage-sama, is there something wrong? Naruto asked diplomatically. No one could ever say he was blatantly disrespectful when it was not called for. Before the Sandaime could speak, the white-haired man spoke up, smirking at the blonde. How old are you, kid? he asked. Naruto looked at the man with his purple-ringed eyes, slightly unnerving him for reasons beyond him. I'm 8, he answered, letting his words hang, asking for the man's name. Oh, the man chuckled again. Sorry about that, kid. The name's Jiraiya. Hiruzen looked at his former student with confused eyes, wondering why he gave the child such a normal, calm introduction. Usually his talented, lively student was much more flashy about those kinds of things. It is a pleasure to meet one of the legendary Sannin. Jiraiya-sama. Naruto greeted the man back in a polite fashion, which was only befit of someone the likes of one of the Sannin. Jiraiya bellowed in laughter, his voice vibrating throughout the full room. Damn, sensei, you've already made him a stickler. He laughed even harder. Just you wait, I'll cure him. Yet Hiruzen sighed, shaking his head at his student's antics. He should have known that the legendary Toad Sage of Mount Myaboku couldn't stay serious for too long. If Kami is a merciful god, then you won't turn this innocent boy into anything like you. This just made Jiraiya laugh harder, which made the Sandaime sigh more dramatically. Hiruzen, Jiraiya Danzo began in his cold, rough voice, we have important matters to discuss. His deceptive eyes met Naruto's. We can play catch up later. For now we should continue with the matter at hand. Jiraiya looked at the older man out of the corner of his eye, a suspicious gleam in his dark orbs. Danzo is right, Hiruzen started. Team 6, you have been called here for a specific reason. He produced a scroll from his robe, somehow managing to do so without either Naruto nor Neji noticing. The aged Hokage was extremely skilled. There was no doubt this is a scroll we received yesterday morning. His eyes met Naruto's, and Naruto understood that something had happened. Do any of you know anything about Kyomogakure no Sato? Naruto, Neji, and Lilith were silent for a few seconds before Naruto nodded. Kumogakure no Sado is one of the 5 great hidden shinobi villages. It's allegedly the strongest village after us military-wise. Jiraiya nodded, impressed. He's pretty smart for one so young. What does Kumo have anything to do with us, Hokage-sama? Is this regarding my clan? Niji asked with a calm, respectable tone. He knew Kumo was the village that demanded the head of his uncle and that his father was the one given in exchange. His host still felt nothing but anger towards them, but now he knew that it was all just another unmemorable event in this shinobi-infested world. He had to act the part though, and Hyuga Niji was no fan of clouds. No, Niji-kun, this has nothing to do with your clan, but rather Team 6. Hiruzen answered. He unlaced the red thread that tied the scroll together and handed it to Jiraiya, who in turn handed it to Naruto with a small smirk. It would seem that the secret about your eyes has slipped past our borders. Naruto narrowed his eyes in confusion before reading the contents of the scroll to one Uzumaki. Naruto, as the Yandame Reikage of Kumogakure no Sado, I officially invite you and all of Team 6 to this year's Chunin exams, which will be held in Kumogakure this year. Whispers of the samsara once again gracing the world have reached our humble nation, and we would be honored to have you enter the exams under Kanagakure no Sado's banner, as our village holds the one who possessed your fantastic eyes long ago. In the highest respect, even collecting his legendary tools, we think it appropriate to have you visit and enjoy the glory the Chunin exams can bring those who pass it. We eagerly await your arrival with open arms and hope to use this venture as a crucible to deepen our alliance. Sincerely, the Yandame Reikage. Naruto handed the scroll to Niji. His eyes still narrowed this time, and thought so Kumogakure wanted him to participate in the Chunin exams. He sighed. No, he knew exactly why Kumo wanted him to visit their village. That place was always preparing for war, and they wanted what Konoha, and Konoha alone was in possession of dojutsu. Kanagakure was the only village ever that had shinobi who possessed powerful ocular jutsu, and now that Naruto was around, they held the Sharingan Byakugan and the Rinnegan, making Konoha even scarier than they already were. They were no longer just the most powerful shinobi village, but something more with all 3, and they didn't even know about Niji's unique set of eyes yet. Dojutsu exclusively in their ranks, they could surely change the way things worked. Power affected everything, the economy being the major instance. With power came reputation, and with a strong good reputation led to more missions, even from foreign villages. Once one single village had too much power, too much money would begin to flow into the village, causing inflation, and too little money would reach the other villages, which would cause deflation. The entire balance of the hidden village system would be thrown off track, and if history was anything to go by, would very quickly lead to war. Thus, now that Naruto's eyes had reached other villages, those villages would do anything and everything to either coerce him to join their ranks or assassinate him to preserve the fragile balance of the village system. Either way, things were only going to get more complicated now, and Naruto's plans would once again need to be pushed to an earlier time. How do they know so much about me, my eyes, my name, my rank? Aren't these things classified? He was slightly confused. There was no way any of the Uchiha let slip his secret, so it was another shinobi, or perhaps a civilian. Maybe it was a merchant gossiping about the strange eyes he saw in Konoha. That wouldn't explain the fact that Kumo knew his name and rank, though he sighed. He needed to be more careful now. That is also a mystery to us as well. Your full name and rank shouldn't be known all the way to Kumogakure, yet you've only been assisting me since you've become a genin. Hiruzen replied honestly. We have a leak. Danzo informed them in his sharp tone. We'll find it. Hiruzen, he promised his longtime rival and oldest friend. Hiruzen nodded thankfully. Thank you, old friend. Now we just need to figure out a way to decline their offer without looking weak or disrespectful, since they went out of their way to send such a nice letter. Jiraiya said. Any suggestions? Naruto never met the man's eyes, but he could tell that the Jonin commander was staring at him with observing eyes, and then he spoke. Are we sure we want to decline? He asked, to the great shock of the others. Are we sure we want to decline? Jiraiya asked, incredulous. They're rookie Shikaku, really young rookies. Of course we're sure we want to decline. Jiraiya looked at the man as if he was crazy. There have been younger shinobi to become Chunin. Jiraiya-sama. Shikaku retorted. Your student is the prime example. The Toad Sennin narrowed his eyes. That was during the war. The protocol is different in times of war. You know that this isn't wartime. He pointed to the 3 young ninja. Plus, they've only been doing mundane missions that involve putting away paperwork. They are in no way, shape, or form ready for the challenges this exam will put them through. Shikaku coolly looked at Team 6's eyes, seemingly seeing through them. Are you so sure about that, Jiraiya-sama? Have you ever seen them in a battle? It was in this very moment that Naruto found someone who he feared. This Nara Shikaku was scary, perceptive, far surpassing even Itachi. Lilith leaned into Niji, whispering words into his ear that only the Hyuga boy could hear. Niji, to his credit, showed no outward expression, his calm stoic facade still in place, but inwardly he was shocked. He too leaned over to his brother, whispering the same words that his wife had whispered to Him and Naruto grinned, feeling the excitement his son was emitting. Hokage-sama, we would like to participate in the Chunin exams. Naruto interrupted the back and forth of Jiraiya and Shikaku. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at the children. Suspicious really, he asked. Why is that? He decided to humor them. Naruto inhaled, ready to lie to highly skilled shinobi, and if Itachi was right, the greatest spymaster ever. He exhaled. I would like to test my eyes, he said bluntly. I am wasting my talent by just assisting you in this office. I want to taste real battle. I'm a shinobi, but all we feel. He gestured to his team is like glorified secretaries. His eyes seemed to pulse in that moment, piquing Hiruzen's interests. Please allow us to show the village that slighted Niji's clan Konoha's strength. Naruto didn't miss the way Danzo's lips slightly curved up. The Sandaime was silent for a moment, thinking it over before he began. Even if I wanted to send you to Kumo, I can't. Naruto showed no emotion. Letting the professor continue. Jiraiya is right, you aren't ready to face the challenges of the exams. I can't send you all the way to Kumo without any combat training. He took a drag of his tobacco pipe. And there's your sensei's situation, or lack of. He shook his head. Too many unknowns. Naruto-kun, I hope you understand. Naruto smirked. Test us, he began. Let us prove to you that we are ready to battle other shinobi. We'll go up against anyone you choose, and we'll pass. I promise you. The determination in both his eyes and voice took the old Sarutobi aback for a moment. We've been training every day since before we even became genin. There was no way Naruto was going to let this opportunity slip through his fingers. We're ready. It was too important, and just to ensure our safety, you can send any shinobi with us as our temporary sensei. No one will be the wiser. Hiruzen was impressed with the boy. He really wanted to go. And you too? The Hokage asked Niji and Lilith. What about you? Do you wish to participate in the Chunin exams? Before the last word even left his tongue, both Niji and Lilith nodded their heads, answering yes. At the same time, it would seem that Naruto was the leader of the group. If Jiraiya hadn't been so upset, he would be reminded of another certain blonde-haired shinobi that was just as smooth with the tongue. You can't seriously be considering this, old man? Jiraiya asked. They don't have any experience. Naruto shook his head. We may not have any experience in the field, but we have had an experienced shinobi training us. Oh really? Jiraiya asked sarcastically. Pray tell. Uchiha Itachi has been teaching us when we don't have missions we can already defend ourselves from Chunin level ninja. Niji decided to reply. In truth, it would probably take Kage level shinobi to best them, but they didn't need to know that. That would bring too much unwanted attention to them. Showing skills befitting a prodigy, no problem, but showing unstoppable power was a big no-no. I still think this is a terrible idea. Jiraiya replied. It could be beneficial for us. Jiraiya-sama. Shikaku began. Konoha shinobi haven't been in Kumogakure for years. This will give us the legitimate reason to get the lay of the land we've been looking for. Like the boy said, a skilled jonin ranked shinobi can accompany them as their sensei, both protecting them from harm and collecting data on the village and its strength. Jiraiya hated arguing with Nara. It never ended in his favor or anyone else's ever. You couldn't out Nara, no matter how hard one tried. So the Toad Sannin did the only thing he could. He sighed and shut up. The exams aren't for another month, so we have plenty of time to test your combat skills, and decided on a ninja to accompany you. Hiruzen began. Naruto smiled at the Hokage. Thank you, Hokage-sama. He bowed his head respectfully. Both Niji and Lilith doing the same. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. The Sandaime replied. Now go, you have much to prepare for, he ordered. Naruto nodded, and together with the rest of Team 6 left the Hokage's office, leaving behind old men and one woman to converse between themselves. Do you think he can use the Rinnegan yet? Hamura, one of the village elders, asked. It would be in our best interests that he could showcase its power in the exams. Koharu, another village elder, said it's very possible if what they say about training with Uchiha Itachi is true. Danzo began. That boy is a genius with dojutsu. He mastered the Sharingan when he was about their age. Everyone nodded, agreeing that Itachi was a prodigy, the likes of which haven't been seen since Hatake Kakashi shocked everyone by graduating the academy at 5 and then again at 6 when he became a Chunin. We shall see during this test. Who do you have in mind? Hiruzen the Sandaime tapped his finger on his desk for a moment, thinking it over. My first pick would be Hatake Kakashi, but he's on an S-ranked mission in Izu no Kuni right now. He then gave an incredibly devious smirk, his eyes falling on the one student who hadn't left his side yet. How about you, Jiraiya? He asked. You're so against them going. Why don't you decide for yourself if they're ready for the challenge? Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at his sensei before he smirked. You really shouldn't set them up to fail, sensei. False hope is the worst kind of wound. Hiruzen sat back into his chair. We shall see, he said sagely. 3 days in our old training grounds. You'll test Team 6 combat skills and decide whether or not they are ready to take the Chunin exams. He then pointed to the Nara, who looked like he wasn't paying attention but was probably the most observant one out of them all. Shikaku, I want you to decide who will accompany them to Kumo as their sensei if they pass their test. If Jiraiya repeated with added emphasis, there was no way in hell he'd let his godson get himself killed before he even had the chance to live. and enjoy the finer things in life like the company of a woman. Hokage-sama, the Jonin commander, nodded. He was silent for a moment until he spoke again, this time curiosity lacing his voice. Hokage-sama, what do you think? The little kunoichi whispered to the Hyuga. He asked. It seemed to make young Naruto want to go to Kumo for some reason. Hiruzen also nodded. Curious, I would like to know as well, but alas, they're already gone. He smiled. Maybe I'll ask them the next time I see them. Shikaku nodded, his mind racing with ideas and possibilities, but no matter how smart the head of the Nara clan was, he would never in a thousand years guess right. Within the privacy of the Uchiha compound, Naruto, Neji, Lilith, Itachi, and the Uchiha patriarch and matriarch gathered in the clan head's house. Privacy seals decorating the walls. Are you sure this is wise? Sennin-sama, Fugaku asked. His arms were like usual crossed and his rough face was just as stoic as his oldest son. This could expose you. Naruto shook his head. The abilities of the Rinnegan are already believed to be otherworldly even in this era, and I highly doubt anyone will uncover who I really am. I did. Itachi spoke. Yes, but not many people are like you, little dragon. Naruto smiled at his best friend. You found out my secret because you saw me use the creation of all things, and even then you wouldn't have known anything if you weren't an Uchiha. Or Neji nodded with his brother's logic. No one in Kumogakure will find out. Why would Kumo personally invite you though? It seems a little too suspicious for my liking. Fugaku said. They know more than they're letting on. They might know that I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Naruto said bluntly. If so, this might be a move to sway me to join their ranks, and they think that you'll just listen to them. Lilith asked. For shinobi, these people are pretty thick in the head. No, they're actually smart. Itachi started. Kumo has the reputation of treating their Jinchuriki better than any other village. They could try using that fact. So it's the same as a few years ago. They wanted dojutsu, nothing more. Neji spoke up. If I were to defect to them, they'd not only gain the Rinnegan but a third Bija. Naruto rubbed his chin with his hand, a habit he had in his past life, except then he had a long impressive beard. They're going for a power move. They get more than just special eyes if they can persuade me. He cleared his throat. The question is why are they making a move against Konoha? They're allied, aren't they? Alliances are such fickle things. Naruto-kun, Makoto said softly. Makoto. Naruto like that woman, she was the only one who treated him like they should. As Uzumaki. Naruto, her personality and Mother Aura was welcomed, and most of the time treaties are just pieces of paper, the words on them not meaning anything. The last war was only stopped because the Yondain was too much to handle. It didn't matter how many shinobi the other nations threw at us, the Yellow Flash could single-handedly take them all on at once. She smiled by himself. Fugaku nodded, his eyes closed. Namake's Minato was indeed the most feared shinobi Konoha had ever produced. If the man had only seen what his son was to become. I see, Naruto replied, and now that my father is gone and only one Sannin is around, the other villages see us as a wounded animal and they're the vultures. Itachi nodded. It would seem so. The youngest Uchiha present agreed. Well then I guess we can show them that they're wrong before we leave. Naruto started. Because we are going to Kumo, and they will see our strength one way or another. It was time. It was sooner than they had planned for, but it was finally time to start to reveal what they could do. After all, missing Nin weren't feared if they were seen as weak genin, and for what they had in mind they needed their very names to strike fear into those who would interfere with them. Why do you wish to go to Kumo so bad? Sennin-sama, Fugaku asked. He was somewhat confused why the blonde wanted to go to the foreign land so badly. Naruto looked to Lilith, who smiled at him, nodding her head. Because two of my children are amongst the clouds, Fugaku, and they have waited long enough to be reunited with their father. Fugaku and Makoto looked at the boy with wide shocked eyes. He was going to collect Kumo's Jinchuriki. Naruto would never forget how excited both he and Kurama had been when Neji whispered Lilith's words into his ear. He was glad that he had a sister who he could trust, and he'd never be able to thank her enough for everything she had done for both him and his brother. She was truly a part of his family now, and he'd go to war with the world for her just as he would for anyone else he held close to his heart. Those words made sure that you have children in Kumo, so the boy is going along with it. After all, it would seem so. Two figures stood in a Spartan room, nothing but a single candle within it. They were whispering conspiratorially, and it was obvious that whoever they were up to no good. Who will be accompanying them? The first to speak asked. The second man shook his head. It hasn't been decided yet. It'll be an experienced ninja, though handpicked by the Jonin commander himself. The first figure nodded. Yes, if the Nara chooses him, then it will be the perfect match. He's never wrong. The second figure nodded, agreeing. There was no doubt that Nara Shikaku was a genius. What would you have me do? The first figure chuckled ominously. Kukukuku, dear Kabuto, isn't it obvious we prepare to greet our friends in the mountains? The second figure, now named Kabuto, About of course Orochimaru-sama. He stood right away. Orochimaru chuckled darkly again. This was going to get interesting, that was for sure. It was time to have some fun. Time skip. He awoke to something warm and soft, inhaling a heavenly scent invaded his nostrils. He chuckled softly. The irony of using heavenly to define her not lost on him. His arms were wrapped around her back firmly pressed up against his chest, her very breath bringing him happiness. Neji smiled into Lilith's hair, enjoying the feeling of embracing the woman he loved most in the world after so long of being separated. His wife held his heart, his very soul within her hands, and she knew that however didn't matter because he held hers as well. They belonged to each other and they'd never leave each other ever again. His hold on her tightened, digging his face further into her beautiful silver hair as he lost himself in her scent. He'd do anything for this woman, for his wife, anything. Good morning, her beautiful entrancing voice sang out. They were in Niji's room in the Hyuga compound. His room wasn't very decorative, but it served its purpose from time to time, mainly when he had to show his face around the compound. Both Niji and Lilith usually stayed with Naruto in the Uchiha compound, but if Niji, who was a ward of the clan head, didn't make periodic appearances in his clan's compound, then people would begin to search, and if they were lucky, or unlucky depending on your loyalties, they'd stumble onto something they certainly were not supposed to. Morning, Niji replied, sighing in content. If it were up to either of them, they'd stay this way for a few thousand years, maybe even eternity, but it wasn't up to them and they had much to do. We should get going, he began. Nisan will be waiting for us. He felt Lilith stir, groaning in such a way that could even be called cute, and if one knew anything about Lilith, she didn't do cute. Provocative, most definitely seductive, no doubt strikingly beautiful, absolutely, but cute. Niji chuckled to himself again. He kind of liked being with her when she looked so young. It felt as if they were growing up together and he would make sure they grew old together. Can't we stay like this for just a bit longer, she asked in a pleading voice. I want you all to myself for a while more, she practically purred as his arms pressed her further into him. The world, the plan, your brother, they can all wait. Niji smiled softly once again, breathing in her hypnotic scent. If only my love, he whispered. If only, he sighed this time in a mixture of annoyance and irritation. But we can't. We promised my brother that we'd meet him early. We have to discuss our strategy for our trial. Lilith snorted dismissively. Please, she began. Any one of us could handle this entire village alone. The only shinobi who could possibly give us trouble is the Hokage himself, and I don't think the old monkey is going to fight a bunch of genin. Even Lilith, a demon queen from another dimension, knew that Sarutobi Hiruzen, the god of shinobi, was not one to be trifled with. His status alone was fearsome and his skills even more so. It's not losing that we need to prepare for, but how we win, Niji explained. We need to show that we're ready for the challenges to come, but we cannot reveal our true strength. We need to prepare for what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. If anyone knew about even a fraction of the power any one of them possessed, it could make things a bit complicated. They needed to show the strength of Chunin, nothing more. Lilith sighed, hating that she could see the logic in his words. Ignorance was bliss. She understood that now. Fine, she groaned. But I want something in return, she whispered lusciously. She smiled seductively while turning her head, her slim hands snaking up the back of his head, bringing their faces close. Finally, after a cruel pause, their lips met, a chaste kiss exchanged between husband and wife. This was a rather complicated, unforeseen situation for them. While the two were husband and wife in their past lives, they were essentially 9 and 12 years old in this era. While they had been inseparable lovers before the time of shinobi or even ninjutsu, they were children now, and even though their love was just as strong and untainted, they couldn't act upon it like they were used to. It just wasn't right, not yet at least. But the thing about their love, the thing that made it so beautiful, was that they could wait for each other for literally millennia, and their love would not fade. 1,000 years had passed since the last time they felt the wondrous pleasures a wife and husband made when making love. They could wait a few more. Well, that's how Niji felt about the matter, but Lilith not so much. After their lips separated, the silver-haired girl's hands sneakily turned south, but were intercepted by Niji's. Lilith, he whispered, his voice expressing how hard it was for him not to let her have her way with him. Lilith glared at him in slight irritation. No one has to know, Amira, she whispered back pleadingly. Please, I miss my husband's touch. Her hand once again tried to move down, but once again her hand was stopped. I'm touching you now, he replied with a small smirk on his face. He wasn't lying, they were touching, just not in the way she craved. You know what I meant, she snapped back, her azure eyes blazing like fire, her anger showing. It's been too long, I've dreamt of what it would be like when I was finally back in your arms. She looked around the room and then at the way they were cuddling, and this was not it. She turned her entire body, her chest now pressed up into his, their foreheads touching. If it's the way our bodies look, then we could change that easily, just for a few hours. A wife never felt more beautiful, safer, more loved than when her husband expressed his love for her through lovemaking, or that's how it was for Lilith. Hamura wasn't the best at expressing his feelings, much not in the way she knew he could, but when they were connected and nothing else mattered but their hungry thrusts, she felt everything his heart wanted to say. She missed that in that moment. While he looked into her beautiful azure eyes, Niji was actually tempted to give in, to give her what she wanted, and he would have if there hadn't been a knock on the door. Lilith sighed, her eyes narrowing dangerously at the door, daring someone to walk through it. Niji just smiled at her softly. "I'll see you in a moment, love," he whispered, getting out of bed. "We'll discuss this more later." Lilith turned her lethal glare at him, giving him a frightening look. "You better believe it," she retorted as she walked to one of the only things that decorated the plain room. A mirror sat on the wall directly opposite the door, its large wooden frame out of place in the near-empty room of the Hyuga prodigy. Gently reaching out, Lilith placed a single delicate finger on the surface of the mirror, and in an instant she was gone, leaving Niji the only one present. He sighed. He hadn't heard the last of this. He was sure of that. He cleared his throat and began. "Yes, who is it?" he asked. From behind the door a familiar voice spoke out. "Niji-san, Hayashi-sama has requested your presence. Please meet him in his office before your departure today." It was one of the branch family servants, an older woman who always looked after the younger Hyuga children. Niji couldn't quite remember her name, but he knew her to be a warm, polite woman who deserved much more respect than the clan gave her. Of course, he answered through the door as he dressed. "Thank you." He heard the woman walk away, her duty done. As he slipped his sandals on his feet, he sighed. Now what in the world would the clan head want with him? Lilith was in a sour mood as she walked through the home of the Uchiha clan head. Not only would her husband not scratch an itch she had for 1,000 years, but they were interrupted during a serious conversation. And to think this morning had turned out to be so good. Waking in the arms of her husband was a luxury she would never take for granted again, and even though it was but a peck, they had shared a kiss. She had hoped that all of this would have led to something more, but that thought had been destroyed before it even officially began. Apparently her bitterness was incredibly noticeable, because a rather amused voice spoke from her side, startling her. "You seem chipper, Sister Naruto." Mused, she almost jumped. She hadn't noticed him at all. What are you doing?" she asked heatedly, crossing her arms. When he chuckled, she glared at him even harder. "I was about to join Itachi and his family for breakfast." He asked. It was then that Lilith realized that she had arrived in the Uchiha compound via mirror travel, a personal favorite means of transportation, and that she had no grounds to be at all upset with her brother-in-law. But Lilith was nothing if not stubborn, and she would stay in whatever mood she damned well pleased. "That is none of your business," she replied defiantly, turning away from the blonde, which only made him chuckle at her childishness. "Careful, Lilith," he began. "If I didn't know better, I'd think you really were a 12-year-old girl." He laughed softly at her reaction, which would have been rather scary if Naruto hadn't been scared of anything ever. "Then it is fortunate that you do know better," Lilith replied crisply. Before either could continue, they arrived at the kitchen where Itachi, Fugaku, Makoto and Sasuke already sat, and a delicious breakfast already on the table. "Naruto-kun, Lilith-chan." Makoto greeted them warmly. "Welcome." There were 3 empty seats at the table and 3 plates full of delicious food waiting to be eaten. "Where's Niji-kun?" she asked, noticing that Naruto's brother was not with them. Lilith huffed, crossing her arms as she took a seat at the table next to Sasuke and began to eat her breakfast in silence. Naruto shook his head, chuckling at Lilith's antics. "He'll be here soon," Naruto reassured them. He didn't know where his brother was or what he was doing, but he knew he'd show up sooner or later. As the blonde took his seat next to Fugaku, Itachi took it upon himself to start the conversation they needed to have. "We need to discuss your strategy, Naruto-san," he began. It didn't matter that they were at the dinner table or that his Otudo was sitting right next to him. "Whoever you go up against in the test, you need to set limits for yourselves." Naruto decided to listen as he ate Makoto's delicious meal. "Do you have anything in mind?" Lilith was still grumpy, so she was silent as always, and Naruto was enjoying a rather juicy piece of bacon. Sighing, Itachi massaged his forehead. It was almost like he really was dealing with children. Seeing his son's dilemma, Fugaku cleared his throat, the deep sound getting everyone's attention. "Naruto-sama," he began, "do you have anything in mind for your upcoming trial of combat?" he asked in a no-nonsense tone, which actually made Naruto look a bit sheepish. "Oh, I apologize." He looked to the Uchiha matriarch. "This is really good, Makoto-san," he praised the woman before turning his attention back to Fugaku and Itachi. "As for the trial, I was thinking about showcasing some of my Rinnegan techniques." Itachi narrowed his eyes in confusion. "I thought we agreed that you would keep those hidden." Fugaku nodded, agreeing with his oldest son. "I don't think using the Rinnegan is a good idea, Naruto-sama. You shouldn't show your hand too early in the game. Having the Rinnegan was one thing, but being able to use its gifts was another, and the Uchiha clan head wasn't so sure if the world was ready for this yet." Naruto smiled, eating some rice before continuing. "I don't mean that I'm going to show them everything, just enough to pique their interests, enough to send me to Kumo. I was thinking about this last night. Normally all I would have to do is show that I am at least Chunin level, but in my case things are a bit different. I need to prove that I am both at least Chunin level and that I can defend the eyes that this shinobi world would go to war for. To do that I need to show Konoha that my eyes are actually mine and that no one, not even the leaf, can take them from me. Itachi was silent for a moment, his brilliant mind replaying Naruto's words over and over again until he nodded. I see, that would be wise. In all honesty, it would have hindered them if they didn't prove that they could safeguard the Rinnegan. Kyomogakure had already tried to steal dojutsu from Konoha, and they were still most likely bitter at how that ended for them. The death of their head ninja would not fade from their minds so quickly, but it is instrumental that you also prove that you do not rely too heavily on your eyes. Chunin are the middle point of genin and jonin. They need to know the basics like a genin, but also have a versatile arsenal. Use the abilities of your eyes too periodically and you won't pass their test. Itachi knew well that a shinobi was made a chunin for more than just raw power. Finesse, skill, and intelligence played a major role in the decision-making. Naruto nodded, agreeing. Yeah, that is why I will be putting your training to good use, Itachi-sensei, he said with a small smile on his face. Naruto knew that Itachi was more than a little excited about teaching the Rikudo Sennin. Itachi tried to hold back the smile that slowly crept onto his face, but to no avail. He smiled, and that smile increased when he saw the way his family looked at him. His father, Uchiha Fugaku, the Uchiha clan head, looked at him with pride. Fugaku was proud that his son was going to help their progenitor make a difference in the world. A father couldn't be more proud. His mother, Uchiha Makoto, the Uchiha matriarch, looked at him with warmth and love. She was also proud of her son, and she couldn't have asked for a better role model for their youngest. His brother, Uchiha Sasuke, his precious Otudo, looked at him with wide awe-inspired eyes. Sasuke always knew that his Aniki was the coolest, and even though he wasn't positive what Naruto-sama and his brother would do, he knew that it would be important. His brother was important. There was silence for a moment until a knock at the door was heard. God damn it, Lilith shouted. She was really getting sick and tired of all these people interrupting important moments by rudely knocking on doors uninvited. Everyone just looked at her with strange eyes, wondering why she was shouting. Niji sat in the Hyuga clan head's office with Hyuga Hayashi sitting on the other side of a large desk, their pale white eyes holding each other's gazes. He had been there for a few minutes now, and neither had spoken. It seemed Hayashi was trying to decipher something, to find something that only his eyes could express. It didn't bother Niji, though he was used to this. Silence and staring was easy, it was talking that was difficult. I've been informed that your team has been invited to the Chunin exams, Hayashi began. It appeared it was time to talk. Wonderful. Niji nodded slightly, remembering his place within the clan. He had a part to play for now. Yes, Hayashi-sama, he began. Kyomogakure no Sato has sent an invitation for us to participate in the exams. Hokage-sama agreed to test our combat readiness, and if we pass he'll allow us to compete. There was really no need to hide these types of things from anyone, or at least any shinobi within Konoha. Hayashi would just have been informed of it later anyways. Niji was both a member of the man's clan and the man's personal ward. Of course he'd know. Hayashi was silent for a moment, again his stoic eyes watching his brother's son. And you feel you're ready for such an exam, he asked. Does your Hyuga blood tell you that you can bring honor to our clan? Niji's face expressed nothing, the perfect example of Hyuga elegance. Yes, Hayashi-sama, he replied, I am ready. Once more the Hyuga clan head was quiet for a brief moment. You understand why your father no longer dwells in the world of the living, correct? He asked his nephew. For Niji it was a strange question. His host felt many emotions for his deceased father, but the part of him that was Himura, the dominant part, felt little to nothing about the entire affair. So doing the only thing he thought best to do in such a situation, he let the host's feelings slip out. Yes, he began through clenched teeth. Kyumo sent their head ninja to our village under the pretense of peace, and tried to steal the Byakugan through Hinata-sama. His hands clenched into fists, and he felt his anger welling. The man was struck dead and his body was given back to Kyumo, but they demanded reconciliation for their dead official and demanded your head. The entire time Hayashi was silent, observing the way his nephew reacted as he told the story. Instead, my father Hyuga Izashi, who was your younger identical twin, decided to take your place, ensuring that the Hyuga clan could keep their leader. Niji's eyes were no longer empty white orbs, because now they were filled with hate and anger. My father was sacrificed for the greater good. A harsh silence fell over the room, its plain white walls watching them. Niji visibly shook with anger, his father's memory hitting him with full force. The man who smiled at him when he proved his prodigy, the man who loved him unconditionally, the man who was taken from him prematurely by wolves in sheep's clothing, his precious father. Your trial is tomorrow, Hayashi stated, ending the silence abruptly. I will be there too. Watch. The man with noble elegance stood, his posture that of a king. I will expect you to pass, Niji. I expect you to go to Kyomogakure. I expect you to participate in the Chunin exams, and I expect you to show them just how powerful the Hyuga blood runs through your veins. Niji blinked, confused. He had never heard his uncle speak with such emotion in his voice before. The man always wore a mask of stoicism, his face ever emotionless. To see him so expressive took him aback for a moment. I understand. Hayashi-sama Niji finally replied. Do you? Hayashi asked. Do you truly understand what I am telling you? His eyes locked onto his nephews. I want you to show everyone in that Kami-forsaken village the fate that awaits them if they harm us ever again. I want them to fear what we are capable of, what you will be capable of. I've heard the branch family members, they say you are the embodiment of our clan, that you should be the heir. Niji looked away for more reasons than the clan head thought. We will see if what they say is true, and then you will show the clouds the same. Contrary to the beliefs of many, Hayashi loved his younger brother very dearly, and when he had to allow him to sacrifice himself for the clan, it was the hardest thing in his life he ever had to do. Niji suddenly stood, a fierce, determined expression on his face. It will be an honor, uncle. He spoke informally for the first time with the man who led the Hyuga. Hayashi nodded, and his eyes expressed something they never had until that day: respect and love for his nephew, for his brother's son. Kage Shisui began sitting down at the table in the Uchiha house. That's the shinobi they've picked to send with you, he reported to the great sage he decided to follow. Uchiha Shisui was a man known far and wide, widely considered one of the greatest shinobi to ever be born in the Uchiha clan, second only to his cousin and close friend Itachi. His skill matched Itachi's, and his loyalty was even fiercer, but Shisui more than anything craved peace. He dreamed of a world free from war, suffering, strife, and pointless death. He was a visionary, a peace seeker, just like Itachi. The fact that there was someone just like Itachi born in the same era, in the same clan, was as phenomenal as it was strange. People like Shisui, like Itachi, they changed the world, be it good or bad, and they didn't show up all of the time. His descendants were truly amazing. Kage Itachi asked. I've heard of him. He narrowed his eyes in concentration. One of the Hokage's personal ANBU, right? He wondered. Fugaku nodded his head. I too have heard of Kage. He specializes in infiltration and reconnaissance. I've heard great things about that young man. It was true. Kage had made a name for himself as a successful information gatherer. He utilized the shadows almost as proficiently as the Nara, and he was effective in mostly any situation that involved stealth. Yes, but he's also young, 19. I believe, Shisui replied. While he and Itachi were even younger, they were also Uchiha prodigies and had complete mastery over the Sharingan. Kage was skilled in his line of work, but he wasn't a frontline ninja. He isn't a heavy hitter either. He's focused all of his training in spy work and stealth. I won't deny that he's incredibly good at what he does, but he's not the person I thought Hokage-sama would pick at all. A B-ranked stealth-heavy ninja would not have been my first choice. I'm surprised. Naruto began. I thought the Hokage would have sent someone with more experience in A-rank Jonin. At the very least it was strange to him. Everyone, and he meant everyone, made such a big deal about his eyes that he was sure the Hokage would have sent someone more practical. What was stealth going to accomplish if things went south, unless they're sending someone efficient in infiltration and reconnaissance because they want to spy on Kumogakure? He stated they're using this invitation to further their knowledge on the enemy. He chuckled dryly. Even though they have a peace treaty, this shinobi world was far more devious than he thought. Everything was used to further another's goals. No doubt Kumo was doing the same with the invitation. They probably thought they could sway him to join their village. His eyes were extremely valuable and feared Naruto wouldn't put it past them to try and force him to join their ranks. If he refused, or maybe even kill him, taking out a potentially extremely dangerous threat may be worth the inevitable war that would spark because of such an action. In their eyes, the balance of power was everything to these people, to these shinobi, and they'd do anything to keep it the way it was. You are correct, Sennin-sama. Shisui nodded. But Kage is not the only one they're sending. His eyes met Itachi's. The Hokage and the village elders have deemed it necessary to send a small ANBU envoy with you, Itachi, and I will be coming along with Tenzo. Hokage-sama's orders. Lilith raised an eyebrow. And Kumo will just let something like that occur? I don't reckon they'd be too happy with 3 highly capable ANBU running around their village. Shisui shook his head. They don't have a choice. They were the ones to invite a specific team to their village. It isn't our right to. His eyes fell on Naruto. Protect the village's security, he finished. For the young Uchiha, they're not just sending a Rinnegan wielder to another village, they're sending a Jinchuriki. Lilith scowled at the title. She wasn't extremely close with Hagoromo's creations, but she did think of them as family, and she could relate with the demon hate they've received in the last century. Under that pretense, 3 ANBU guards is a rather small amount of security. To add to that, we as ANBU will only have limited access to the village. Our movements will not only be restricted but overseen. Shisui explained we will only be allowed to move as freely as Kumo permits us, which is only where Team 6 goes. The restrictions were many, but if anyone could maneuver around such simpleton things as restrictions, which was not at all in the ANBU Black Ops vocabulary, it was Itachi and Shisui. They didn't call him Shunshin, no Shisui for nothing after all, and Itachi, well, he was Itachi, which was enough. Naruto didn't know who this Tenzo character was, but he suspected him to be just the man for the job. Shisui nodded. Itachi was confused. Though why the two of us though, he asked. Surely Hatake Taicho will be back in Time for their departure. Why would they send two Uchiha with Tenzo-san? It was a little suspicious. In his mind, Hatake Kakashi was the ANBU captain, having more years in the shady organization under his belt than anyone ever. He even had a Sharingan, so it couldn't be the dojutsu factor. So what was it? I think Hokage-sama feels that Naruto's parentage would get in the way of Kakashi's judgment, and the three of us are specifically capable of handling the 9 tails, so I imagine that had something to do with their decision-making. Shursui replied that was the only explanation he had at the moment. It was true though, Tenzo had his birth gift that could seal away a bijou, and considering they weren't only taking a Jinchuriki into enemy territory but heading to a place that had 2 of their own human sacrifices, Tenzo was an obvious choice, and with their mastery of the Sharingan, both Itachi and Shursui could suppress bijou chakra. Nara Shikaku-san personally saw to this setup. After all, he's most likely thought of everything and has contingency plans for the contingency plan. Itachi still wasn't convinced, but he held his tongue for now. Whatever the case may be, Naruto began, we have to first prove ourselves worthy before we can go anywhere. Lilith sighed. You too, she asked. Why can't we just rock the person we face's world and be done with it, she asked. She was still slightly upset with how her morning turned out. Naruto shook his head, considering no, we can't show too much skill. We have the fact that Itachi's been training us that will give us a little more wiggle room. No one doubts his prodigy. He took a drink of tea Makoto had made earlier, but we can't just steamroll a Jonin. We have to show that we can work smoothly as a unit while simultaneously showcasing out individual prowess. He sighed. This is going to be harder than I thought. At that moment, Niji appeared in the kitchen where everyone was still sitting at the table, enjoying the breakfast the Uchiha matriarch had made. I'm sorry that I'm late. Niji bowed respectfully to everyone, a courtesy more than anything. I was summoned by the Hyuga clan head, he announced. What did Hayashi want with you? Fugaku asked, curious. The Hyuga and Uchiha had bad blood between them, both clans believing themselves to be the superior, and the fact that they were the only 2 clans with dojutsu really helped spark their rivalry. He said he was going to be watching our combat trial. He admitted he wants me to go to Kumo and show them the strength of the clan. Lilith snorted. That's all she asked. When Niji's eyes met hers, she looked away, still upset. Niji just sighed, rolling his eyes. He walked over to the empty seat next to his wife and sat down, placing his hand on hers, which was on the table. She didn't make any move to remove his hand from hers, though she had spent 1,000 years without him. She wasn't going to let some disagreement come between them. Oh, she was still very much upset with him and wasn't going to drop the subject, but she could be close to him and still be angry. She was a woman, so fuck logic. Naruto just smiled warmly at his brother and sister, happy that they were reunited so quickly. He then felt a small pang of sorrow, of longing. He really missed his wife more than he let on. She was the first thing he thought of when he opened his eyes in the morning, and the last thing he thought of before he let slumber take him, and even then he dreamt of her. Tsukuyami was his wife, the love of his life. Is everything. I believe I have something in mind for your test, Naruto-sama. Itachi began. Naruto looked at his friend, and he liked what he saw. Itachi had that look in his eyes, the look that said a stroke of brilliance was nigh. Oh, Naruto asked, smirking. Pray tell, little dragon, he intoned, sipping his tea once more. Everyone finished their breakfast as Itachi went over his plan once again, impressing everyone present with his brilliant mind and tactics. Naruto, Itachi, and Lilith walked with the young Uchiha Sasuke towards the academy. They had all finished the wonderful meal Makoto had prepared for them, and Itachi decided to walk his precious little brother to school, deciding to enjoy the morning air. Naruto tagged along, and both Niji and Lilith went with them. Unfortunately, Niji was whisked away by some Hyuga messenger reporting that he was summoned by the elders. Lilith had demanded to come with him, but Naruto received the secret plea to calm the woman down and take her with him for the walk. He promised to find them after he was finished with whatever it was he was needed for. So Lilith found herself with her brother-in-law from an era long forgotten and shrouded in legend, an extremely powerful young shinobi and the reincarnation of said brother-in-law's oldest son. Sometimes this whole new era thing was a bit confusing. Sasuke happily walked next to Itachi, the former's chest puffed out slightly, proud to be the brother of the famous, or infamous, considering what region of the world you were in. Uchiha Itachi. Naruto walked next to Sasuke with a familiarly protective stature, happily smiling at what remained of his first son's presence within the boy. Indra's chakra was his now, but Sasuke still possessed his soul, so technically he was Indra, or the reincarnation of Indra's transmigrant essence. Sometimes this whole new era thing was a bit confusing. Will you be able to pick me up, Nii-san? Sasuke asked hopefully. He liked to brag about Itachi. When the academy ended to the other students, not everyone could say they were related to the youngest ANBU operative to ever grace Konoha. Itachi gave his brother a small smile, his heavy, already weary eyes gazing at the one person he would burn the world to ash for just for their safety. I will try and make it, Otudo, he said. Naruto looked at Itachi with a small amount of pity. No one so young should know enough to have eyes like his little dragon. No one. I promise, Sasuke-kun, I will personally make sure. Itachi is here to pick you up today, he promised the boy he would not ignore ever again. Sasuke's returning smile even made Lilith's grumpy mood wash away, the childish ignorance warming her heart. Thank you, Naruto-san, Sasuke shouted, suddenly taking the blonde by his hand and leading him to other academy students. Naruto was a little shocked and confused until Sasuke began to introduce him to other children of their age. He blinked before smiling and greeting everyone who was introduced to him as Naruto played with the kids his own age. Lilith chuckled, shaking her head. You'd never guess what he's capable of by just looking at him. She began. Look at him, she said, he's acting just like another 8-year-old. She chuckled some more. Itachi was silent for a moment, just observing the literal demon before him, his analytical eyes feeding his genius mind information as fast as an R. As you fear him, don't you? It wasn't a question why. Itachi asked, what happened to make you still fear him? Thousands of years later he had been curious ever since the day Lilith showed up. Her body language, the way she went silent when he entered a room, everything she did screamed that she was scared of Naruto, or wary at the very least. Lilith went quiet, turning her face away from Itachi. She was like that for a moment before she spoke. Have you ever wondered why humanity hasn't encountered demons in this realm for thousands of years? She asked. Itachi contemplated the question for a moment. While most of the world thought that the Bijou were actual demons, the shinobi, the intelligent ones, knew that they were not in fact demons but extremely large constructs of sentient chakra. Their exact origin has been shrouded in mystery though. So with that information, Itachi began. No, I have never thought about it. Now that he did think about it, it was rather strange that no one had ever encountered demons or any other species in recorded shinobi history. Did they once freely walk the earth? He asked, curious. He didn't know much about demonic kind, and to any real ninja knowledge was power. Even before I arrived, demons roamed the lands bringing carnage and destruction to humanity. They had no other motives to their madness besides carnal desires. They were a serious problem to everyone and humanity's second enemy, their first being themselves. Itachi listened as Lilith described ancient history. There were many small battles against humankind and demons, and even total wars, which humans would later call crusades. Memories of how she first met her husband rushed through her mind. I was the reason for the second crusade, she admitted, surprising Itachi. I was utterly defeated by my husband's brother. A shiver ran through her. He called upon stars from the heavens and smashed my entire army in one fell swoop. She finally made eye contact with the boy, her azure eyes serious. That alone would have been enough to justify my longing fear of him. She then turned back to observe the playful blonde, but even that paled in comparison to the purge, she stated ominously. The purge? Itachi asked. He somewhat already had an idea what this purge was, but he wanted to hear it from her. Lilith just stared at Naruto for a moment, and Itachi could not read her emotions from her expressions. Then she spoke. The purge is the day the Rikudo Sennin washed away all demonic life from this realm, she stated bluntly, her voice low, and it was the day he decided it was alright if I married his brother. That had been both the most terrifying and greatest day of her life. While Hagoromo still didn't accept her, she found happiness in her marriage. She had never actually loved someone, not truly. She gave her everything to Hamura, and even mothered his children before Itachi could speak. Naruto was once again with them. Did you know just about every main clan has their heir or heiress in the same class as Sasuke-kun? Naruto stated incredulously. What are the odds of that happening? Lilith and Itachi just stared at the smiling blonde strangely. What? He asked. He narrowed his eyes in confusion. Nothing, Lilith replied. Shall we return to the compound? She asked as she began to walk away. Itachi nodded, following the silver-haired girl back to his family's estate. They still needed to discuss the plan for tomorrow. Naruto just blinked again, looking at the two retreating forms. Oddly, was it something? He said, deciding to let it go. He shrugged his shoulders and began to walk. As well, Hyuga Neji, branch family member of the prosperous Hyuga clan, you have been summoned here today to answer questions we the elders have for you. An aged, obvious Hyuga man began. 4 men and 1 woman in all white robes the same color as their eyes sat in a row on an elevated platform looking down at Neji, who stood in the center of the room. They were all in a poorly lit room, something that meant nothing to holders of the Byakugan, with no windows or anything at all to let in any light from the outside. Nothing but the elders' platform, which sat a long desk and candles to give what little light that resided in the Spartan room. Neji narrowed his eyes in confusion. What questions are these, Elder Sama? He asked. What did the elders of the clan want with him? A branch family member. He hadn't done anything to warrant a summoning like this, not to his knowledge at least. Do not act as if you haven't been sneaking off to the Uchiha compound for the last few weeks, child. A second elder, this one distinctly feminine, began. You have been brought here today to confess. The reasoning why you have been Conspiring with our rivals for clan dominance. Niji looked at the woman who hid her face in the shadows like she was a complete idiot. That's what you want to know? He asked. I did not know the activity of a lowly branch member such as myself was so important to you, he admitted. His tone held contempt and arrogance within it, the latter foe, the former completely genuine. The Hyuga blood has never flown within a Hyuga as potent as it does you, Niji. Another man began, his voice soft and gentle, almost affectionate. None of us here deny that commonly known fact. You have proven yourself a genius, proven to not only us but the entire clan that you are not merely some worthless boy but a fellow clansman who will help bring fame and glory to the clan. Niji smirked. These people had no idea what was going on right under their noses. They had no idea who walked among them. Again, we are just concerned that the Uchiha will try and exploit you and your considerable skills for the gain of their own clan. While Niji was still just a green genin, he was still considered a prodigy. Students didn't ever graduate early from the academy unless they showed a beyond exceptional aptitude for the shinobi arts, and even then to graduate the academy at 9 was a feat truly admirable. The Hyuga hadn't had such prodigy amongst their clansmen since the Hayashi and Azashi twins were born. Those brothers had shown the world just how deadly the Hyuga could be if they wished, fighting in both the end of the Second Shinobi World War and the entirety of the Third Hyuga. Niji was on the same path as his father and uncle, and the entire clan knew it. Some even wanted to see Niji succeed Hayashi-sama instead of Hyuga Hanadaheim. In case you have all forgot, I am a member of Team 6 and my teammate Uzumaki Naruto is studying under Uchiha Itachi. Niji found the need to play along with these shinobi incredibly annoying. He only found solace in the fact that they would be leaving this dreadful place soon. Naruto-san convinced Itachi-san to allow Lilith-san and I to join their sessions, which are usually held in the Uchiha compound. He explained in a bored, slightly irritated tone. I don't think anyone can deny that Uchiha Itachi is a skilled shinobi. I was given a chance to study under him for the time being, and I took that chance. It has made me a skilled shinobi. Because of it, while he could, if he really wanted, destroy the entire village by himself, he couldn't let anyone else know that. So his increase in skill and power had to come from somewhere, i.e. Itachi. Regardless, you are a Hyuga and you simply cannot. The first elder to speak began again but was cut off by Niji's amused voice. I cannot. What? He asked. The last time I checked I was a ward of Hyuga Hayashi-sama, not yours. He wasn't intending to stand here all day and let these foolish shinobi tell him what he could and could not do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to meet my team for a training session. We're going to be combat tested tomorrow, you see, and we'd like to prepare as much as we can. With an impolite bow, Niji turned away from the wise elders of the Hyuga clan and walked away, completely ignoring their demands for him to stay. He was done with playing their games for the day. The worst part about the whole thing was that these morons were of his clan. He found what little comfort he could that they weren't directly descended from him. After all, his descendants were not born on the earth, but on the moon. I mean it. Jiraiya Sarutobi, Hiruzen stated again as they walked to the new area. Team 6 combat trial would be held and give them a fair test, nothing less. The trial was meant to be had in a simple training ground, but after word got around that the Rinnegan was going to be tested, many people demanded to be present. First it was Danzo, his old friend and second in command, and the other two elders Koharu and Hamura. Hiruzen had been willing to allow that. The three always helped him in matters of great importance, and of course Nara Shikaku was required to be present. The man would help assess their skill level. Again, Hiruzen agreed with the Jonin commander being present, but in the Sandame really should have seen it coming. The leader of the TNI division, Yamanaka Inoichi, and the head of the Akimichi clan, Akimichi Chosa, had decided to watch as well, curious to see what the prodigy with the Rinnegan could do. Those two were close personal friends with Shikaku and leaders of two prominent clans of Konoha, so Hiruzen allowed it. But once word got out that the heads of clans could attend the trial of the Rinnegan Hayashi, the Hyuga clan head demanded to be present. His ward and nephew Hyuga Niji would be there, so it was in his right to attend. Again, Hiruzen agreed to let him come, and of course, if the Hyuga were going to be allowed to attend, then the Uchiha demanded that they also be invited. So to keep the peace, Uchiha Fugaku and his wife Makoto would be there. Inuzuka Tsum thought it would be interesting, so she would make an appearance, and then Aburame Shibi and Aburame Muta would be present, the former representing their clan, the latter being Shibi's apprentice, and asked to tag along for the instructive experience. What should have been a small gathering turned out to be a huge spectacle, and a simple training ground would not suffice, not with all these people, so Hiruzen moved the area. Team 6 would be tested to the arena that was set up in Training Ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. Unlike in the Chunin exams, however, no one was expected to fight and survive within the forest itself, so everyone was going to witness Team 6, which was beginning to be called the Prodigy Cell, at their best. Jiraiya just nodded. Yes, I know, old man, he replied. I'm not going to cripple them or anything. Naruto was his beloved student's son, and his godson, of course. He'd never actually harm him or his fellow teammates. I just want to make sure we're not sending infants into the slaughterhouse. Jiraiya Hiruzen began. Naruto's been receiving training from Uchiha Itachi for at least a year now. There's no doubt in my mind that they're ready for this. If Itachi thinks so, I'm inclined to believe him. Itachi was one of his greatest operatives, ready to put the village above his clan any day. He was truly an amazing shinobi. Even if he was young, Itachi may be skilled, but even he is still just a child. Itachi was no doubt a prodigy, but that didn't make him 100% right in everything. We will see just how prepared these three are, and I will give them the chance they deserve, but I will not just let them win. They're going to have to earn this like everyone else. Hiruzen nodded, happy that Jiraiya was going to give Team 6 a chance. At the very least, this was an important trial. After all, no one had ever tested the Rinnegan like this before, or at least not to Hiruzen's knowledge. Jiraiya, however, had something or someone to compare Naruto to. After all, he'd trained a Rinnegan wielder once before, and he knew if Naruto was anything like Nagato, he would be ready for the Chunin exams. Standing in the middle of the arena, the giant stone hands formed into the ram seal behind them. Team 6 stared up at the Hokage and his student, who stood on the viewing platform above. The three were dressed in shinobi wear, looks of readiness on their faces. Naruto simply wore a plain long-sleeved black shirt, its sleeves slightly longer than his arms, its collar high, mirroring the Uchihas. Wore simple black shinobi pants, adorned his legs tied at the ankles with white bandages. His Itachi, which also had a black cloth, was wrapped around his head, and he wore black shinobi sandals. Curiously, a Chikudo finished out his appearance attached at his right hip. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at the blonde, analyzing every single little detail about his godson. Neji was dressed in formal Hyuga robes, white long-sleeved shirt and black pants. His shirt, like Naruto's, had slightly longer sleeves, cloaking his hands from view. The black cloth of his Itachi was wrapped around his head, and black shinobi sandals adorned his feet. Again, a Chikudo curiously finished his appearance strapped to his right hip. Jiraiya raised a single eyebrow. While it wasn't unheard of for a Hyuga shinobi to be sufficient in Kenjutsu, it was rather rare, and for both Neji and Naruto to wield a blade of the same kind was a little suspicious. For Jiraiya, the last, but certainly not the least member of Team 6, Lilith, a young girl around 12, the oldest of the team, stood proud, a hint of a smirk on her face. She wore a sleeveless black and white top and simple yet oddly elegant black kunoichi pants and matching sandals. Her creamy dusky skin was a bit too developed for her age, and her short silver hair accented her azure eyes. She, like the others, had a Chikudo attached at her right hip. All three genin were declaring some kind of skill in Kenjutsu. Then Jiraiya smirked. Maybe Minato's son and his teammates would surprise them. The Sandaime Hokage cleared his throat, ready to get things started. Team 6, he began. Today is the day you will be combat tested. You have been invited to the Chunin exams by the Yondaime Reikage, and today we will determine whether or not you will be attending. He gave the three young children a warm smile. Try your best and make us all proud. He gestured to the impressive gathering. Konoha will be watching you. Hi Hokage-sama, we will do our best, Naruto replied, slightly bowing his head. His teammates followed his example, showing their leader his due respect. Hiruzen was the one man Naruto, Neji, and Lilith did not want to test. They were extremely powerful individuals, but so was the professor. Even by Naruto's standards, Naruto could not only see but feel the Hokage's chakra. Sarutobi, Hiruzen was not one to be trifled with, not without considerable thought beforehand. Even if Naruto challenged him in open combat, he'd definitely have to have Kurama assist him. That's how powerful the god of shinobi was, and to think the man was so far out of his prime at the moment. Just how powerful was he before? Good, Hiruzen replied. Now to introduce your opponent, he began. The Hokage did not get to say any more though, because Jiraiya suddenly jumped into the arena, making a spectacle of things as usual. The gusty, brave, and oh so very handsome Jiraiya, the gallant, at your services. The Toad Sannin introduced himself while jumping around on one foot, flourishing his arms in a strange way. Naruto, Neji, and Lilith just looked at the man with confused eyes. Jiraiya sighed. No one appreciates a good entrance anymore, he whispered. Are we going to be facing you, Jiraiya-sama? Naruto asked. This was definitely going to be an interesting test. If one of the Sannin was going to be their opponent. That's right, kid, Jiraiya stated with a smirk on his face. You can always quit now, you know, he added. He wasn't disappointed because Naruto just smiled at him calmly, the same expression Minato used to give him when faced with a difficult task. I think you already know my answer, Jiraiya-sama, the blonde replied. Jiraiya didn't miss how Neji and Lilith just stared at him with confident eyes, never wavering. I think so too, the sage of Mount Myaboku said. Well, let's get on with it then. He began. The test is simple. The three of you need to take these bells from me, Jiraiya explained. He took two small bells from his pocket, holding them by their red string. Usually you would be told that only two of you would pass this exam, and the one who could not take a bell would be sent back to the academy, but seeing as how this is a test to make sure the three of you are ready for the Chunin exams, that explanation doesn't work, he smirked. So work together and try to take these from me. We're not only testing your individual skills, but how You work as a unit. He tied the bells to his waist and then nodded. Okay, don't hold back, give me everything you got. Do you understand? He asked. He got a nod from each member of Team 6 and he smiled wildly at them. Good, he shouted. Then let's begin, he yelled, taking a defensive position, wanting to see how they were as aggressors. The smirks on their faces made Jiraiya a little uneasy. In a blink, Team 6 began first. Neji rushed and getting in close to challenge a living legend in taijutsu with palms alit with blazing chakra. Jiraiya saw the blow the Hyuga was going to strike him with. His right hand was quick but easily read. The Toad Sage went to catch the boy's strike, showing him how foolish it was to rush an older, more experienced shinobi. Regardless of how deadly your taijutsu was, that would be the first time Jiraiya would be surprised that day, and certainly not the last. Instead of striking the Sannin with his obvious right hand, he gripped his Chikudo with his left hand and unsheathed it, slashing out at the white-haired man simultaneously. Jiraiya actually had to disengage, else have a genin draw blood. He had to admit that had been a clever, rather deceptive move. The footwork alone Neji just showcased was exceptional. To avoid the strike, he had to jump into the air. Now airborne, he would meet the only female of the team who had at some point clung to the ceiling, so they knew how to adhere to surfaces using chakra. Then, to avoid a volley of extremely precise shuriken and kunai, Jiraiya flipped his body midair, showcasing impressive reflexes. As he fell to the ground, he noticed Naruto looking at the exact spot he would be landing. This had all been planned. This kind of teamwork was not heard of with Genin Green Genin. At that, curious Jiraiya let gravity take him to where they wanted him to land, wanting to see what the son of Namake's Minato could do, and he did. Naruto showed them all something they'd never forget, faster than any Genin or Chunin for that matter should be capable of. Naruto used both of his hands to weave one-handed hand seals. Using a single hand to weave one-handed hand seals was almost unheard of. The chakra control and practice to do such a thing was Kage level, and even Jiraiya hadn't tried to master it. But simultaneously weaving different hand seals with each hand should have been impossible. It would mean immediately the Hyuga and Uchiha present activated their respective dojutsu, confirming what everyone thought the boy was doing. He was somehow simultaneously needing two types of nature transformations within his body. The moment Jiraiya's feet touched the floor, Naruto put his thumb to his mouth and breathed both water and fire, one element shooting out of either side of his thumb. With another single-handed hand seal, he stomped his foot, and while the fire-water combo rushed the Sannin, the earth all around him rose, creating three walls, one behind him and one on either side of him, trapping him in the way of the coming impossible technique. He looked up the only exit besides down and saw Neji sticking to the ceiling, weaving hand seals of his own. Somewhere in the back of Jiraiya's mind he realized how strange it was for a Hyuga to be using elemental ninjutsu, but that wasn't important right now. What was important was the death-inducing combination of fire and water rushing at his person, and the gale of powerful wind coming for him from above. He was effectively trapped and dead by the looks of it. But Jiraiya wasn't just. Given his legendary status, it would take much more than this extremely impressive showcase of teamwork, strategy, and ninjutsu mastery. Clapping his hands, Jiraiya shouted the name of his technique, a technique that had saved his life more times than he cared to admit, Needle Jizo. That's when his mane of gray-white hair suddenly expanded, covering his entire body before sharpening with enough chakra. This technique could stop just about anything with incredible force that had no business belonging to mere genin. Impacted the Sannin, the force causing a loud boom. Steam and dust enshrouded the arena, covering them from the sight of their observers. Everyone watched with bated breath for the obstruction to clear, but Hiruzen watched with narrowed eyes. He knew something had been off with how the three children acted all the time, and the sudden friendship between Naruto and Neji. And now seeing the kind of skill Team 6 had, his eyes were now opened, and he would watch and wait for whatever this feeling was to bear fruit. The steam and dust cleared, showing Jiraiya unharmed. His hair began to recede, and he smirked. That sure was something, kid. How'd you do it? Jiraiya asked Naruto, who was now accompanied by Neji. They destroyed the arena. Inuzuka Tsum, the clan head of the Inuzuka clan, whispered. Her faithful Ninken at her side growled, watching the boy with eyes that screamed alpha so loud Kuramaru wanted to jump in the arena and help him, and Tsum was right. The entire floor where Naruto's technique had rushed past was scarred, ripped to pieces. The point of impact, Jiraiya looked like an Akimichi in their giant size, smashed the places to bits with furious fists. Naruto just smiled softly. Shouldn't you pay attention to your surrounds rather than talk to the enemy? Naruto asked politely, pointing to the ground. As Jiraiya looked at the stone floor, it was already too late. Lilith burst from the earth, her hand reaching out to Jiraiya's waist, where her hand gripped one of the bells and pulled, jumping away from a strike in the form of a punch. Lilith safely landed next to Neji, smiling as she dangled the bell by its red string. That's one bell, Jiraiya-sama, Lilith chirped happily. That girl, Jiraiya hadn't felt that girl at all. How she could mask her chakra signature to that extent while using a technique to barrel underground was a mystery to the sage. These weren't average Genin, that much Jiraiya was sure you three are a lot better than I thought. I'll give you that. The older shinobi admitted you work together as if you've all known each other for many years. His words almost made Lilith lose herself in laughter, but she managed to keep up her fake smirk. But now we're going to step our game up, he smirked as his hands blurred, creating hand signs faster than any eyes could see. He's actually using ninjutsu against rookie Genin. Hamura asked. He knows what he's doing, Koharu responded, though she did not sound confident. Jiraiya took in a deep breath and then spat a giant fireball at the three rookies. Neji and Lilith, who had been standing at Naruto's side, suddenly dashed behind the blonde, successfully falling into a triangle formation. The ball of flame rushed Team 6, and the observers watched with curious eyes, wanting to see what the Prodigy Cell would do. The Uchiha watched with their Sharingan, and the Hyuga watched with their Byakugan, just waiting to Kido. That's when Naruto raised a single arm, reaching out to the chakra-induced fire. What should have been a scorched end became impossibility. Everyone leaned in close, trying to get a good look at what they were seeing, for when the white-hot fire reached Naruto's hand, it began to shrink in size, like the jutsu was being absorbed. Those with dojutsu could see the young boy taking in the Sannin's chakra into his body, dispersing it by spinning it in the opposite direction. He was making an S-ranked shinobi's jutsu completely ineffective. Ninjutsu is completely ineffective against me, Jiraiya-sama, Naruto proclaimed. Jiraiya just stared at the blonde child with awe in his eyes. That technique didn't even have a fraction of the strength he could have put into it. He didn't want to kill them after all, just push them, but it surely packed a punch. A Genin should not have handled it with such relative ease. Jiraiya blinked, snapping himself out of his thoughts as he noticed movement. The test was not over, and Team 6 was not done. With impressive speed, Neji spun, grabbing both his and Lilith's swords, throwing them both at Jiraiya while spinning the blades flying at their opponent. With great precision, Jiraiya skillfully dodged both blades before blitzing them in response. Neji then grabbed Naruto's Chikudo and rushed Jiraiya at a speed most Genin didn't even know about. The Sannin smirked, taking out a kunai to meet the Hyuga in a spectacular fashion. Steel met steel, clashing, sparks flying around them as they fought for dominance. In a stunning display of swordsmanship, Neji let go of his blade, once again spinning, but this time he didn't stop. Hyuga Hayashi went wide-eyed as he witnessed a branch family child use a technique reserved for the main house with the kind of perfection you'd expect from an adult. 8 trigrams, palms revolving heaven, Neji whispered coolly, almost dismissively, able to grab his blade before his technique began adding to its already lethal nature. His chakra sang, forming a blue sphere around him, able to both defend and attack. Jiraiya's kunai met the spinning dome and his entire arm was pushed back. The Sannin leapt back, not wanting to be hit by the Hyuga's ultimate defense. Your prodigy has not been over-exaggerated, Jiraiya said as Neji ceased spinning. I know grown Hyuga men who cannot efficiently use that technique. He heard the whispers of the Hyuga branch family. Jiraiya was a spymaster. It was his thing to know things, and he knew just how talented his fellow clansmen thought Hyuga Neji was. Now he knew firsthand that their claims were not unfounded. Locking gazes with his senior, Neji smirked. That's when Naruto's voice rang out from behind the aged ninja. Jiraiya-sama, he shouted. Look, it's another bell, he said happily. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at the bell within the blonde's hands and then looked at his waist. Indeed, the bell was gone when he asked, and then he realized it when Neji had thrown the Chikudo at him. It hadn't been to hit him, but caught the string of the bell. Jiraiya chuckled, incredulous. Well, I'll be damned, he began. The last team to actually get both bells was my own, he said. Tsunade, Jiraiya and Orochimaru had been the only case after the test was first given to their sensei Hiruzen when he was young to successfully take both bells, even though Jiraiya had failed the test and was tied to a stump. So that is the Prodigy Cell, is it? Aburame Shibi spoke. That name is not unfounded, Muta replied. Shibi nodded. I concur. And those are Genin? Tsum asked, incredulous. What the hell have you been teaching them? Itachi, she asked the Uchiha prodigy that was standing next to her with his family. Itachi looked at the older woman with calm, weary eyes. They are naturally gifted, Tsum-san, he admitted. I have only been able to push them in the direction they've already decided to take. Tsum huffed. I wish my son was so promising, she complained. Naruto, Neji and Lilith looked up to the Hokage, who was now conversing with the Nara. Jiraiya followed their eyes to his sensei and smirked. I'll go see what they're talking about. In such hushed tones, he said. Naruto just smiled at him, nodding. Jiraiya then vanished, only to flicker back into existence next to the Sannin. Naruto watched him as he joined them to talk in whispers, and he already knew what it was about. No one had shown that kind of elemental ninjutsu mastery probably in the course of shinobi history, and if they were honest, they still hadn't. Naruto was using a unique mix of ninjutsu and Ninshu, if asked, he could say that it was an ability of the Rinnegan, gifting him with perfect absolute chakra control. The use of the Preta path had also been necessary. He needed to showcase that he had some control over the abilities his awesome eyes gifted upon him. The blonde Uzumaki looked behind him, meeting the eyes of Itachi, who was standing next to his parents. Itachi nodded to his friend, and Naruto nodded back. They had done it exactly the way Itachi had planned, down to the last minute detail. A strong yet strangely gentle voice began in the arena of training ground 44. I would first just like to tell you all how impressed you've made everyone here today. It has been many years since a team with your capabilities has been forged. Hiruzen began. Individually you have shown skills far above your rank. I think we can all agree on that. Everyone in the room nodded silently. As a unit you've managed to successfully complete a difficult task against a difficult opponent, proving that as a team anything is possible, and that is the Konoha way. We cherish our comrades and we work together to complete our dreams, just as the Senju and Uchiha did before us. All eyes secretly fell on Fugaku, Itachi, and Makoto, the only 3 Uchiha in the room. You were brought here to test your readiness for the Chunin exams, and I would be foolish to not grant you permission. Naruto smirked. Thank you, Okage-sama. I am glad to hear your confidence in us. My team and I have worked very hard to get to where we are at in our teamwork, and we wouldn't have even come close without the help of my Shursho Uchiha Itachi. Naruto wasn't going to take all of the credit. Itachi played an important role in all of this. The spark in Hiruzen's old dark eyes wasn't noticed by anyone, not even the analytical Itachi. The third was piecing a puzzle together that no one even knew existed. Thousands upon thousands of theories running through his mind as he simultaneously carried on a conversation. Yes, it would seem that learning the shinobi arts from a skilled ninja such as Itachi Koen has been extremely beneficial. He spoke. Shikaku, the Jonin commander of Konohagakure, began. Team 6 has proven themselves ready for the Chunin exams and will be participating in this year's test taking place in Kumogakure no Sato. You will meet with your designate sensei for this trip tomorrow, but for now you may return to the village. He smirked. And well done, you've certainly earned the right to participate, that's for sure, he added. Team 6 nodded before turning and heading for the exit, where Itachi and his family met them. Hayashi watched as his nephew, the branch family child who had just used a main family technique like it was the easiest thing in the world, leave the arena with his team and the Uchiha. As they left, he couldn't help but think that there was something different about Niji. His brother's son wasn't as arrogant as he was before, and a lot calmer. Something had changed since he graduated the academy, since he started to hang around the Uchiha. It was at this moment that Sarutobi, Hiruzen, Nara, Shikaku, and Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared before him, their faces serious. Hayashi, the Hokage, began, his eyes still lingering on the door. Naruto and company had just exited through. We need to talk, he started in a grave tone. It's about Niji. The Sandaime knew you needed all the pieces to finish a puzzle, and he wasn't going to stop until he acquired them all. Something was amiss concerning Team 6, and he was determined to uncover it. A single distinctly unhuman figure stood in the darkness of a single room within the impressively massive metal skyscrapers of AIM. Its room was completely void of everything. 4 dark, almost dreadful walls stood tall, both the ceiling and floor exactly the same. There was no bed, no lights or candles, no personal objects whatsoever, nothing. There was absolutely nothing within this creature's room, just like with its soul, nameless. It was actually nameless. It didn't belong in this world, which it found ironic since it had been shaping this world to its master's will for 1,000 years. It had no real face, just a blank black head with a singular eye that was just as empty as its room. It felt nothing, no remorse, no compassion, no pity, not even fear or pain, nothing. All that it cared about was the mission. That's all that mattered, the mission. It had subtly and smoothly shaped the outcome of everything that concerned his descendants, their wars against each other, the countless battles between his sons, everything. Its hand may as well hold the pen and write history in its image, in its master's image. Its mission was by far the most difficult, dangerous, and damn near impossible kind, but it had done it. Everything had been falling into place like carefully positioned dominoes. All that was left was to take that man's creations from him, and it would complete its 1,000-year mission. Its mission was simple: bring back Mother. It had been so confident everyone who could have possibly stopped its goal was long gone, lost in legend and lore. With the passage of time, it may or may not have had something to do with making them more myth than history, but as it stood in its room, if it could even be called such, in complete silence, as stiff and straight as the walls that surrounded it, it felt for the first time ever anxiety. It could feel itself shaking, trembling in fear at the information it had acquired. This could change everything, mess up everything. It couldn't have foreseen this happening. It shouldn't have happened. All of its carefully executed plans, all of its patience, everything was now threatened with the news the snake had shared. It cursed itself. It had become too lax, too unaware. This should never have slipped its attention. Time was getting to it. Too much time had passed where nothing was a threat to it, and now it may be too late. It needed to be sure. It needed to see them for itself. Only when it Could see them with its own. Could they be sure? It was almost positive, though it knew the requirements for them to show up. Yes, it knew the one they called Zetsu knew that if the Rinnegan was in Konoha, that could only mean that the one thing it was afraid of was also in Konoha. Zetsu's plans were in danger. What to do? Time skip. Lilith's eyes snapped open, her breath heavily labored. It took her a few seconds to calm herself, and when she could finally breathe normally again, she remembered where she was. And when she was, Niji's arms unconsciously tightened around her and she sighed. His embrace stopped her from shaking and calmed her frantic mind. She hadn't dreamt of that night for a while. Bringing it up with Itachi the other day must have brought it back to the forefront of her mind. She took a deep breath. The warm walls of the room they shared within the Uchiha compound calming her further. She began to listen to the rhythm of Niji's breaths, further comforting her. The purge, it had been a traumatizing event for her, and she would probably never forget it. She turned her body, snuggling her face into Niji's chest. It wasn't the broad-toned chest Himura used to have, but she didn't care. The man who held her was her husband, no matter what he looked like. It was the ultimate gesture of love. Outward appearances meant little to them. What they had fallen in love with was what lay underneath the skin. Niji sleepily readjusted his position to better hold his wife now that she was facing him. His left arm cradled her head as she dug into his chest, and his right arm wrapped around her side to hold the small of her back, which he used to better hold her against his own body. As Lilith's warm breath brushed against Niji's soft exposed skin, he rarely slept with a shirt on. She couldn't help but smile. Even in his sleep her husband could make her feel safe and at ease. Just moments ago she had awoken terrified, and now she was peacefully listening to the man she love's heartbeat. It was strong and powerful, oddly similar to what his heart sounded like in his previous life. That made her smile again. He was still Himura, her Himura. She sighed in content as the black of slumber began to take her again. As long as he was with her she would be fine, no matter what they were forced to go through or do. It was all okay as long as she never had to be separated from him again. This was her wish granted, the very thing she dreamed of for millennia. Lilith fell asleep within seconds, missing how Niji peeked open a single eye looking at his beautiful wife. Before smiling, he was always there for her, even if she didn't know it. Naruto watched as the trap was minutes from being sprung. His eyes were serious and almost narrowed, his concentration at the highest of levels. A single bead of sweat fell down the side of his face, making its way to his chin before falling to the ground below, making a silent splash. He hadn't been so nervous before in his entire life. Are you sure this is wise, Naruto? Niji asked. Even if your plan works, you know we will be discovered. His voice was serious, his eyes locked on the trap. Naruto nodded, never taking his eyes off the trap. Of course I am sure, Niji, he replied. I was born with a gift for this kind of thing. Databeo. Inwardly an obviously feminine snicker was heard. Databeo, Niji repeated confusedly. The word was strange. Hush now, brother, it is about to begin. The fruits of our labor are upon us, he shouted softly, leaning forward in his seat. Niji nodded, mirroring his brother by leaning forward in his seat. The veins around his eyes bulged, the Byakugan now active. He wanted to see everything as it happened. His white orbs narrowed in concentration, watching his brother's brilliance in awe. It's never going to work, you know. Lilith voiced her opinion. He may not be a powerful A-rank jonin, but he is intelligent. She crossed her arms. He's never going to fall for something so primitive. You should use something with more force, something that he won't have time to dodge or catch. No, Naruto responded, his voice incredibly serious. They always expect something complicated and complex. They're calling us the prodigy cell, so now everyone is trying to look underneath the underneath, Naruto explained, quoting Itachi. But this, he continued, this is so brilliantly simple that he'll never see it coming. The blonde had a smug, proud look on his face. Ingenious, Niji added. Lilith could do nothing but sigh. He's here, Naruto announced, Niji nodding in agreement. Naruto could feel their intended target approaching, and Niji could see him through the walls. It is now time to announce it to the village, to the world. The door slowly began to slide open, and the three genin held their breath, watching in extreme anticipation. And then Naruto's so plain its brilliant trap was sprung. It was a complete success. Kage, a B-rank Tokubetsu jonin of the ANBU Black Ops, blinked. He was just still. The sounds of snickering and giggling sounded out in the empty Academy room. Team 6 was supposed to meet their designated sensei for the Chunin exams, and again Kage blinked, perplexed that he wasn't able to dodge the incredibly dirty chalkboard eraser that fell on his head, causing used chalk dust to infest his hair and cover his shoulders. You're right, Naruto, Niji began in a calm, elegant voice that barely held back his amusement. You are the best prankster in Konoha. Pranking shinobi was an extremely difficult task, but Naruto did it in equal amounts of ease and fashion. Thank you, Naruto smiled. Thank you. He waved his hands in the air as if accepting applause. Only he could hear. Idiot, Lilith whispered, although her giggles told everyone that she didn't mean it. The agent was a plain-looking man. He had an unmemorable face with dark eyes and hair. There truly was nothing at all that made the man stand out, which was probably why he was so good at infiltration and espionage. He wasn't tall, but he wasn't short either. He wasn't young, but wasn't old. Now that Team 6 got a good look at the man. It was actually really hard to describe him in detail. He was male, had dark hair and dark eyes that matched the description of over half the men in the elemental nations. The man had an extreme talent for blending, and Kage looked at the 3 genin before him with a confused stare. This was the prodigy cell he'd heard about so much the past few hours. These were the children the Hokage was sending with him into enemy territory to compete in the Chunin exams. So far, Kage was not impressed, not at all. If you're done being juvenile, we can start. The ANBU operative began. He bent over and with an annoyed sigh dusted the chalk out of his hair the best he could. Naruto just shrugged. You can't please everyone. Placing 3 folders in front of Naruto, Lilith, and Neji, Kage walked to the chalkboard. Picking up a piece of chalk, he cleared his throat before he began. My name is Kagami, and for the next couple of months, I will be your sensei, the black-haired man explained as he wrote his name on the blackboard. They all realized that the man was using a fake name. For us to successfully do this, we need to be versed in each other's mannerisms. We must seem like we've been sensei and student longer than a couple of minutes. By the time we enter the land of lightning, he turned to face them. In the folders given to you, you will find a detailed list of exercises we will be taking in the next couple of days to better get acquainted, and a list of questions I'd like you all to answer by our next meeting tomorrow. Will you be answering these questions as well, Kagami-san? Lilith asked, curious. It's Kagami-sensei now, Lilith-san. Kage corrected. Lilith already didn't like this man. And no, I will be submitting answers from a different set of questions. When you submit yours, why use different ones? Naruto asked, now serious about the meeting. I am an ANBU operative. My profile is classified. Kage explained, facts about my identity as your sensei will be given to all of us to study. Naruto nodded his head, accepting that answer. During this venture you will be under my direct command. What I say goes. Do you understand me? Team 6 nodded. Good. Now I saw your combat test, and while I'm not very fond of your individual personalities here, he brushed some dust off his shoulder, as a unit you 3 are very effective. It will make all of this easier. He then looked Naruto in the eyes, not flinching at all when he was met with the legendary Rinnegan. I expect professionalism from all of you. He stated, no pranks. Understood. Again, Team 6 nodded. Alright then, we should get along just fine. Meet me at Training Ground 13 tomorrow at noon and have those questions answered. That's all. You're excused. Their new sensei gathered up his papers and was gone, leaving Team 6 alone. We've got a professional. Great, Lilith muttered. The man acted as if he had a stick up his rear end. It'll be fine, Naruto began. He stood picking up the folder he was given. We just need to show him that we can be professional when the time comes, and he won't give us too much trouble. Neji and Lilith stood as well, their folders in their hands. I hope you're right, brother. Neji replied, this mission is going to be difficult as is. How are we supposed to take Gyuki and Matatabi in secret if we have a stickler for the rules on our backs? This plan was already going to be a long shot, but with someone like Kage constantly watching them, everything would be even harder. Don't worry, Neji will figure it all out, Naruto answered, his voice then turned serious. My children will be free soon, no matter what. I don't care if we have to fight off the entire village, he stated. I will not let them be prisoners any longer. Neji silently nodded, vowing to free his brother's creations. Lilith took Neji's hand into hers, and he turned to her. She smiled at him, nodding. Neji smiled back. His wife would fight to free the bijou as well. A warm feeling fell over them. They were a family now, and they hadn't ever felt stronger in their lives. Naruto then looked downcast. All that was missing was Tsukuyami. It was late. The sun had set hours ago, and the moon lit the village of Kanagakure. ANBU patrolled the streets in the shadows, and the majority of the citizens were either asleep or in the comfort of their homes. This was not the case, however, for 6 men, 6 shinobi. I don't understand, Hyuga Hayashi stated, sitting at the meeting table deep underground in the ANBU headquarters. Sure, they're extremely talented for their age, but why do you suspect something is wrong with Team 6? Hayashi-san, we do not doubt their genius, Sarutobi Aruzan replied, but what we saw 4 days ago was not the work of genin. When was the last time you saw green genin accomplish what Team 6 did? What did you expect from the Rinnegan? Hayashi retorted, those eyes have been said to be the eyes of God. I've trained another with those eyes. Jiraiya of the Sannin stated, surprising mostly everyone present. What was that? Nara Shikaku asked, his hard eyes gazing at Jiraiya. During the Second Shinobi World War, while my team was in AIM, we discovered 3 orphans. When we were about to leave the country, Jiraiya explained, I decided to stay behind and help them, teach them how to survive. The country was all but destroyed. They would have surely died if I didn't help. The aged sage sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Shortly after, one of them, Nagato, awakened the Rinnegan. To save his friend from a shinobi, he looked to Hayashi. I've trained a Rinnegan wielder before for 3 years, and Naruto showed skill far beyond the prodigy Nagato had become. Why wasn't I informed? Shikaku asked. All information passed through him. He needed crucial information if they wanted him to successfully lead the Jonin forces. It was a time of war. Shikaku, Jiraiya began. Those 3 could barely survive their own country. I wasn't going to give incentive to another to seek them out. Konoha was responsible for killing the boy's parents. He'd never trust the village enough to enter our ranks. He shook his head. Too many problems would have been brought to them, so I kept him in his eyes a secret. Shikaku dropped the subject but still wasn't very happy about someone withholding valuable information. So you say that Naruto-kun is far beyond Nagato? Hiruzen asked. The sage nodded. Far beyond, he replied. Nagato had mastered all 5 basic nature chakra by the time he was 10, but he could never use 2 different techniques at once like Naruto did, and what he did to stop my jutsu, I've never even heard of anything like that. Kami, all 5 nature chakra at 10. Shikaku wondered what the hell are these eyes were forgetting who the boy's parents were. Shimura Danzo II in command stated. While Danzo wanted Orochimaru to be the Yondaime for personal reasons, he couldn't deny that Namikaze Minato was a force to be reckoned with. He had almost single-handedly ended a world war by himself and could slaughter thousands in the blink of an eye. The Yondaime was a young prodigy as well, if I'm not mistaken. No, Minato was nothing like Naruto. Jiraiya started. It's not just about his strength. He looked to Shikaku, gesturing for the man to explain. I've observed the speech patterns and body language of Team 6. The Jonin commander began. They don't speak like children, and the other 2 follow Naruto like he's their leader. I've only seen that kind of loyalty with the Hokage. In the ANBU, he stated, when Naruto moves they move. He doesn't even have to speak. They react to his every gesture, his every gaze. He shook his head. I'm telling you now, those are not the acts of children. Are you saying they're imposters? Danzo asked. No, Shikaku replied. I'm not sure what it means, but I know for a fact that Team 6 is more than just young genin. He looked to the Hokage, asking permission with his eyes. Hiruzen nodded. The Uchiha, he began. They were planning a coup. Hayashi's eyes widened. We had 2 operatives on the inside, Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi. They were loyal to Konoha and agreed to spy on their own clan for the village's safety. Hayashi suddenly had a deep respect for those young boys. It looked like there could be no other outcome but all-out war with the Uchiha. But then Uzumaki Naruto started showing up in the Uchiha compound, and within days Itachi and Shisui reported that the coup was no longer going to happen, and that the Uchiha were no longer a threat. He sighed. We believed them. They were our most trusted operatives within the Black Ops, but now we know better. Hiruzen replied. Activate your Byakugan. Hayashi-san, take a look. Hayashi narrowed his eyes in confusion, but did as he was ordered nonetheless. As soon as his dojutsu gazed upon the Sandaime, he knew what they were talking about. Uchiha Shisui can cast a Genjutsu so incredibly powerful that he can implant thoughts into a target's mind without the target ever knowing that anything at all was amiss. The Hokage explained, and I never would have known that he used that technique on me if the Hyuga ANBU operative Nezumi didn't catch Shirsui's chakra commanding my mind. Hayashi narrowed his eyes. He was implanting thoughts into you, he asked. Hiruzen nodded. Apparently so, he replied. What was implanted? Hayashi asked again. The female of Team 6, Lilith. Shikaku started. She's an unknown. The file on her is forged. She just showed up and suddenly she was a citizen of Konoha and a genin of our shinobi forces. For reasons unknown, Shisui manipulated Hokage-sama to integrate Lilith into our systems. But why? Hayashi asked. That girl, she was hanging around Niji quite often. If he wasn't mistaken, that's what we're trying to figure out. Danzo spoke. Why would Shisui want a little girl in Konoha badly enough to commit treason? Our sources say she's close with your ward. Shikaku added. Intimately close, he finished. Hayashi looked at Shikaku with skeptical eyes. Niji's only 9, and that girl isn't much older. I doubt they even know what intimate means. Regardless, Jiraiya stated, something is going on between the two. We need to figure out who she is and what she's doing here. He was a spy master, and even he knew nothing of the girl called Lilith except that her name was rather strange. As Naruto's godfather, I will be digging into the situation by trying to extract information from him, he continued, and as Niji is your ward, we'd like you to do the same with your nephew subtly. Of course, Shikaku added. We don't want them to know that we suspect anything. This is ridiculous. Hayashi said. Their children. Those children are skilled enough to complete an exercise designed by the Nidaime Hokage to spot future talent. So far, every team to pass the test has become S-ranked shinobi, including the Sannin and the Yondaime. Shikaku explained that, and the near instantaneous ascension in the academy to shinobi ranks, and we could possibly have a serious threat on our hands. We all saw their trial against Jiraiya-sama. Those 3 worked flawlessly. They shouldn't be that in tandem with one another, especially with knowledge that Lilith just recently joined the village. The Jonin commander shook his head, sighing. We can't afford for something catastrophic to happen, thus we are assigning an operative to shadow them during their time out of the village. While everyone nodded, the Hokage turned to Inu, who had been completely still and silent. So far, Operative Inu, you have been chosen to carry out this mission. Should you agree, you will be expected to spy on fellow Konoha shinobi. Do You accept? Inu nodded, standing a little straighter, saluting his leader. Yes, Hokage-sama, he replied dutifully. So we've resorted to spying on children now. Hayashi sighed. I will see what Niji knows then. He nodded towards the Hokage. We only have a couple days before they leave though. What if I can't attain any information by then, Niji? And I aren't the closest of kin. We don't expect you to figure everything out right away. Shikaku began. Plant the seed, water it slowly. That is our way. Sooner or later one of them will slip up and give us some crucial piece of information that will lead us to the truth, even if it seems unimportant. Hayashi looked at the man who led the Jonin forces with a sliver of admiration in his eyes. It was true. Nara Shikaku could easily expose an entire coup with a single word. It was just how his mind worked. He was always 130 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Hell, probably the entire village. Nodding, Hayashi stood, bowing slightly to the Hokage. If that is all, Hokage-sama, then I will take my leave now. Seeing Hiruzen nod slightly, Hayashi took that as permission to leave. He turned around and was almost out the door before Shikaku spoke once more. Be careful, Hayashi, the Nara head warned. We have no idea what the Rinnegan is truly capable of. Keep your wits about you. Hayashi nodded before leaving the room, his mind on his brother's son. What was Niji up to? Minato and Kushina watched as Naruto hovered in the air, his legs crossed and his eyes closed in front of Kurama, the entity he called his son. He was meditating. They decided exactly what he was trying to accomplish was lost to them, but if his facial expressions were anything to go by, it was something extremely difficult. And then the blonde's eyes snapped open. Now Kurama, he shouted, and with the verbal command, Naruto's still small form burst into crimson. The yellow flash and his wife watched as their son was surrounded in the Kyuubi's demonic chakra, a single tail swinging behind him. Even with how long it had been, that chakra still unnerved Kushina. Memories of close calls flooded her mind, nervousness washing over her body. It was unjust and she understood that, but she had associated everything bad in the world with that chakra, and habits unfortunately died hard. Minato had seen his wife's anxiousness and had wrapped a single arm around her waist, smiling when her eyes met his. And just like that, Kushina was okay again. Damn, her incredibly handsome husband and his absolutely dangerous control over her. A single smile should not be enough to melt her away again. It's the same, Naruto whispered, sighing. He let the chakra cloak that encased him fade away, returning it to his son before closing his eyes and pondering on his current task once again. I know it is more compatible, so what is it? The blonde felt a strong hand on his shoulder, turning him around to meet the eyes of his father's. Explain what you're trying to do and maybe we can help. Minato gave his son his winning smile, and just like with his wife, it was super effective. Naruto decided that his father's charisma was scary. I've noticed that my body in this life is abnormally compatible with Bija chakra. He began to explain, so much in fact that I believe I can now transcend what was previously possible and complete synchronize with my children's chakra. Seeing the slightly confused looks on his parents' faces, he elaborated, anyone with enough practice can draw on a Bija's chakra and use it in battle, which is what you saw earlier. Raising his palm upward, the crimson chakra sprung to life around him, encasing him in a blood-red cloak. But with my new body it should be possible for me to truly bond with Kurama's chakra, to completely meld with it. I'm not entirely sure why, but my new body is so compatible with Bija chakra, it's almost freakish. I've never seen anyone with this kind of chakra resonance. Both Minato and Kushina puffed out their chests in pride. He gets it from his mother, Minato said, bringing said redhead closer to him with the arm that was still wrapped around her. Maybe, Naruto said, wondering, but even factoring in the Uzumaki's vitality, it's still a phenomenon. Biju are fragments of a literal treasure of Kami. Their chakra can literally be described as divine. For a human child to be so in touch with it is odd. Even Hamura and I were not so in touch with divinity at first. Talking about divinity like it was the most normal thing in the world was still somewhat hard for them to process. Naruto had told his parents about his origins, and while they were fascinated, they were also a bit unnerved to know that there were gods that watched them every second of every day. Was a bit creepy to say the least. If that's so, then what seems to be the problem? Minato asked, curious. I'm not entirely sure, Naruto admitted. Every time I call Kurama's power, something's blocking it. I can use his chakra, but I can't synchronize with it, even though my body in theory is capable of it. This was something that was bothering him for a while now. It felt as if when Naruto's eyes widened, Minato began, what is it? Naruto shook his head, his face expressing his pondering. It's nothing, he said, but I think I might know what's holding me back. He sighed. I can't do anything about it right now though, so let's drop the subject for the time being. He didn't want to worry his parents on the off chance. He was right, his parents did seem to want to just drop it, but they respected his choice and started another topic. Have you decided what you're going to do with the Nibi and Hachibi? Kushina asked. She knew her son wanted his creations back, but she wasn't sure how he was going to pull that off without starting another world war. Naruto just smiled. By whatever means necessary, he stated, looking up to Kurama to be met with a smirk of approval. While Kurama had the world's largest superiority complex, he still considered the other Biju his family. While he disliked some more than others, he still dreamed about the day they would all be back together with their father, complete and whole again. Some would like to think all the demonic Kyuubi no Kitsune dreamed about was death and destruction, but the truth was that all he wanted in the world was his family again. Kurama was tired and lonely, but that all changed now that his father was back and he'd help Naruto destroy heaven, if that's what it took to reunite his brothers and sisters again. The absolute conviction in their son's tone almost made them as wary as they were proud people could do terrible things for the sake of their family. Minato knew that firsthand, and the fact that Naruto held more power in his pinky finger than most Kages could turn out to be disastrous, but that's why they were there. Both Minato and Kushina would make sure their sons stayed on the righteous path he had created in his first life, because no matter how wrong the world was, it was always worth saving, and they both knew that Uzumaki Naruto would be the one to save it. Training with Kagami had been quite useful if Naruto was honest. The art of stealth was actually extremely difficult for him at first. His previous life didn't ever call for subtlety. Usually when there was a problem he'd completely overpower whatever it was and be done with it, but now in this era, where men and women could make themselves invisible and slit your throat as easily as cutting through butter, it was smart to have knowledge of the art and have at least some experience with it. After only a couple days, however, Naruto became fascinated with stealth. He was able to complete erase his chakra signature, or if he so chose he could continuously change the nature of his chakra. He could be standing right in front of someone and they wouldn't be able to sense him. They could obviously see him, but they couldn't feel him at all, and if he wanted to he could warp reality around himself so that others could not see him either. Suffice to say, after a week of practice, Naruto was sufficient enough in stealth that he wasn't sure he could find himself if he really tried to hide his presence. Lilith as well was quick to pick of the art of stealth, but Naruto accounted that to her actually having a lot of experience with it. She had stalked the planet for centuries, watching over everything without ever being caught, so she didn't count, since she already knew how to be sneaky. Neji, on the other hand, was a source of amusement. For a few weeks stealth just wasn't his brother's style, and the idea of sneaking around in the shadows did not make him happy. He was almost as direct as Naruto was, and he didn't have the motivation to learn how to hide himself from enemies. There wasn't an enemy in the world that would force Neji to run and hide. The only man he ever feared was his brother, and if Hagoromo truly wanted him dead, there was no running. There wasn't a place on or off the planet that Neji could hide. Thankfully, Naruto was his big brother and loved him very much, so he didn't have to worry about that scenario ever. Anyways, Naruto, however, was able to convince Neji to learn the basics. After a few days of stubborn defiance, Lilith may or may not have helped. Not that she would ever admit it, she was just happy that she had done something naughty with her husband since they were reunited, even if it was incredibly juvenile and not as satisfying as what she had in mind, but she took whatever she could get, and it was for a good cause, a win-win if there ever was one. So it was with a satisfied smile that Naruto walked back to the Uchiha compound with his brother and Lilith, happy that they were so close to getting 2 more of his children back. It would only be another couple of days before they departed for Kumo, and that meant that both Gyuki and Matatabi would be freed in a few days. It had been so long since he had seen them, and he couldn't wait to have more family with him. This era was too dark, too dreary without the brightness of the sun, and to Naruto his creations and family were his sun as bright stars that lit up the big dark skies that threatened to swallow everything up without mercy. A masculine and familiar voice spoke from Naruto's side. Suddenly, the man not being there in the last blink of an eye, "You seem rather chipper. Got a date?" Jiraiya of the Sannin had appeared out of thin air next to Naruto, almost surprising him. "Almost. I mate Jiraiya-sama," Naruto replied without hesitation. "I don't date." The blonde kept his eyes forward, not meeting the curious orbs of this era's great sage. "I wonder," Jiraiya asked, a knowing smirk on his face that Naruto was able to see without looking. "Alright kid, how's getting a bite to eat some?" "My treat," the sage offered warmly, almost genuine. Even if it were anyone else it may have worked, but not on Naruto. He could smell the deception, could feel the uneasiness for Lilith. The man felt he couldn't hide his true intention from him, not as close as they were now. "Okay," he agreed. He turned to Neji and Lilith and smiled. "I'll talk to you guys later." Neji's eyes met his for only a slight moment, and in that moment Neji knew everything Naruto was thinking. So with a slight nod, Neji smiled at Naruto and bowed his head to Jiraiya. Lilith mirroring him before he took his wife and left for the compound, letting his brother take care of it. For anyone else everything would have seemed to be nothing but a team parting ways for the day, but not for Jiraiya. The Sannin knew exactly that the passing of information had just occurred. For it all to happen with only a single glance was stunning, and it made Jiraiya even more nervous. "Well then, let's be on our way," the white-haired man stated. "Do you have any preferences?" Naruto smirked. "Yeah, I do." "Ramen?" Jiraiya asked. "You like ramen?" he asked, almost not believing the fact, slurping up some delicious noodles. Naruto smiled, nodding his head eagerly. "It's my Favorite, the blonde admitted. I've been coming here since I was 5. The owners are really nice to me, to everyone. Really, if I could get away with it I'd live off the stuff, but if I come here too many times a week Tucci-san won't make it for me. He chuckled softly. He worries about my health. They had arrived at a Chiraka Ramen a few minutes prior, honestly surprising Jiraiya a great deal. This was the place the boy's mother loved so much. I see. Jiraiya smiled. Well, that's very responsible of Tucci-san. Isn't it? A small moment of silence passed the two, just enjoying their meals, before the Gama Sennin spoke up once more. Naruto, you mind if I ask you a personal question? Naruto turned to the man, his eyes studying Jiraiya's face. Yeah, go ahead. Who are you? Complete silence fell on them, the entire restaurant seemingly freezing. Nothing was said and nothing moved. I'm Uzumaki. Naruto answered after a short pause. Jiraiya just smirked. Yeah, stupid question, sorry. The Sennin then went back to eating his meal, trying his level best to confuse Naruto in the hopes of him giving accidental information. It was an old trick that old man Sarutobi used to use on him. Naruto observed Jiraiya, the way his lips quirked, the way his eyes slightly narrowed. Jiraiya knew something. Time to improvise. May I ask you a personal question? Naruto asked. The white-haired man gave the boy a sidelong look before nodding his head. Is it true that you're a real sage, that you can actually enter the honorable sage mode? Jiraiya almost choked on the broth that was in his mouth. Sage mode? How in the world did his godson know anything about the honorable sage mode? While the fact that Jiraiya was a sage of Mount Myaboku wasn't exactly classified information, it was still rather secretive, since senjutsu was one of the most powerful techniques that a human could learn. For an 8-year-old to have even the slightest of knowledge of it was a bit disconcerting. Yes, Jiraiya answered honestly, I am capable of reaching sage mode too. My knowledge, I'm the only human in the world who can use it at the moment. He wasn't going to mention Orochimaru, since his greatest friend and rival and now enemy couldn't actually master it. How do you know anything about that? Naruto just smiled. And that means that you're the only person who could possibly sense the presence of natural energy, right? Jiraiya visibly narrowed his eyes, a dangerous look within those dark orbs that had seen more war than they wished to admit. Knowing about natural energy was not common knowledge, and now the Toad Sannin was more suspicious than discreet. Who are you? Jiraiya asked with a deathly quiet voice. Godson's face or not, the pupil of Sarutobi Hiruzen would destroy anyone who was a threat to Konoha. Natural energy was literally in everything. The ground, even when cemented over, could be used to draw out natural energy. The atmosphere contained natural energy in spades, certainly enough to enter sage mode if needed. Even oxygen held natural energy, if only small amounts. The entire world was made up of this stuff. Even on other planets it was proof that it was all made by one being. For ordinary people this energy remained hidden out of view. If one wasn't a sage they could and most likely would go their entire lives without even knowing of natural energy's existence. If one was a sage though, like Jiraiya, one could sense the movement of natural energy easier than the flow of the chakra within their own bodies. It was so prominent once you were taught to utilize it that even the slightest movement of it was like the sun suddenly setting in the afternoon. So when enough natural energy to allow one to stay in sage mode for years started to cling to Uzumaki, Naruto like a long-lost lover, almost crying out in joy at the reunion. Jiraiya literally froze. He was so overwhelmed by the amount of natural energy that was being built up next to so incredibly fast that he honestly couldn't move. While Jiraiya was capable of entering sage mode, he was never able to completely master it. He was just proficient enough to be titled a sage by the toads of Mount Myaboku, but even then his use of senjutsu paled in comparison with what really could be done with the stuff. The aged Sennin had been of the opinion that no one could ever absorb this much natural energy, but he was witnessing it with his own eyes. Stone Naruto was going to turn to stone, forgetting about his previous suspicion. Jiraiya stood from his seat ready to summon that god-awful stick Fukasaku Sama used on him when he was learning the secrets of senjutsu. Just before he could reach his full height, Jiraiya felt a small hand on his shoulder pushing back down into his seat. With stunned awe the Sannin stared into the eyes of Uzumaki. Naruto, the gilded Rinnegan, staring back at him. Naruto smiled. Standing, the blonde leaned in close to Jiraiya, the aged man actually gulping slightly, and whispered into the ear of one of the most powerful men of the era, "Why don't you ask Gamamaru who I am?" And with that, Naruto was gone, leaving a thoroughly shocked Jiraiya. The gallant, what just happened? Naruto body flickered into the Uchiha compound, sighing as he let the mother's gift leave his body, the energy reluctant to separate. After so much time being apart, the mother's gift was almost living energy with a mind of its own, and Naruto's chakra was like a beacon for the stuff right now. It was like a child meeting its parent for the first time. It didn't want to let go, to fade back into the world, but It had no choice. Naruto couldn't walk around with it in his body forever. Well, technically he could, but it would become awfully complicated to do simple things since he'd have the strength of 1,000 men in his fingers. Did everything work out? Nai-san, Niji asked Lilith at his side, holding his arm close to her body. Naruto smiled at his family, nodding. I've given him both information and incentive, now it's up to him to use it. Naruto didn't really want to involve Jiraiya, but his parents expressed the benefits of having a man of Jiraiya's stature as an ally. He couldn't risk just telling the man though, so Naruto decided to do it as discreetly as he could. The fact that Jiraiya was a sage made his decision clear. The seeds were planted, now it was up to Jiraiya to water them. Well then, Lilith started grabbing both Naruto and Niji. We have some preparing to do, don't we? She asked with a smile on her face. Her dream the other night was unimportant now. She was accepted, a part of the family now. The past was the past.